What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to Studs and Duds, the most comprehensive NFL player review series on the internet. Today, we're going to be going through the rising and falling players in the AFC conference from weeks 6 through 9. And we're going to get right into it. Before we do, if you could, please do hit that like button. I really can't stress enough how much goes into this series. So if you could please just take a second to hit that like button. It really does help me out. It tells YouTube you enjoy the content, to push it out to other NFL fans. I really appreciate it. And then I also do want to give the quick spiel that I give to anybody that is new to the series. You can skip ahead 30 seconds if you want, if you know what this series is about. But if you didn't know, this channel originally started way back when as a Madden YouTube channel, and a part of that was this series where I would edit my own custom Madden roster based on watching the film, doing my own research and analysis, and then coming on to this channel talking about why I made the changes I did. And that series hasn't gone anywhere. I'm still making the roster, and that's what this is all about. So it's just a very clean and easy way to keep track of who's playing well, who's not playing well, with those Madden overall ratings to, just convey that to you. So that's what you're going to be seeing throughout this video. I really hope you guys enjoy. Again, please do hit that like button if you do. And let's get started. Our first team here, the Cincinnati Bengals, their star of the month is going to be none other than Trey Hendrickson, the edge rusher. Myself and 95% of people did not see the vision when the Cincinnati Bengals signed him. In his first season, which was 3 years ago, he balled out. Then he got even better last year. And then this year, he's like entering that top tier of pass rusher, man. He is 5th in the NFL in pass rush win rate. He has 9 sacks on the season. He's 8th in total pressures. He is changing things up front, continuing to confirm this narrative that I've been on for a while now, that the Bengals have superstar players on defense that just don't get the recognition. Trey Hendrickson is a problem for opposing offenses, and this Bengals defense is better than people realize. And this guy right here, Trey Hendrickson, is a big part of that. So he deserves his credit. He's on a hot streak going up here for the second episode of Studs and Duds in a row. Then let's talk about the offense a little bit. It's, the Bengals overall, it's just a lot of more role players on the move here. On this winning streak that the Bengals are on, it's been their star players starting to play like stars again. So not a lot of movement there, but some guys that deserve some bumps up in the ratings. Andre Yosevich, the rookie wide receiver out of Princeton, a unique specimen, 6'3", a little over 200 pounds, has the size and physical tools for the position, and they haven't had to call his number much. He's getting 1 or 2 targets a week, but he's converting them. He's gotten a couple touchdowns, been a big-bodied option for Joe Burrow in the red zone. Looks like he can be a nice depth piece for them for now, and we'll see if he continues to grow in time. And then this is a team that has needed a tight end, and in this most recent game against the Buffalo Bills, they may have found one in Tanner Hudson. He is next in line in a list of former quarterbacks, which the broadcast wouldn't stop talking about how he's a former quarterback. Now, this isn't quite Logan Thomas type of stuff where he was drafted as a quarterback or entered the NFL as a quarterback and then changed positions. Tanner Hudson was a quarterback in his final days at Southern Arkansas University. But now, like 6 years later, he entered the NFL in 2018. He is carving out a role as the kind of inline Y tight end for this Bengals offense, starting to get more reps from someone like Irv Smith, who has not had a great season. And he's kind of done that possession tight end thing, finding those soft spots in the zones, moving the chains, being that stick routes target. Joe Burrow seems to like him, so we'll see. He might be a late career breakout, an interesting player. Certainly played a great game against the Buffalo Bills. Getting a +6 here this week for Tanner Hudson. And then Cordell Volson, who we did lower in the last episode of AFC Studs and Duds, is going to get that +1 back. Not that he's been dominant. In fact, he's still continued to have some rough outings in pass protection. That continues to just be a position that I feel like they could do better at. But he's been less of a problem in this last month of football. and continues to be okay as a run blocker. So he's going to go up one. And then onto the defensive side of the ball, my guy Cam Sample showing up just kind of in spots. He's definitely not a consistent player, and at this point probably never going to carve out an opportunity as a starter. But now in that Seahawks game, which was week 6, was really dominant as a pass rusher in his opportunities. That was the second time this season he's made his presence felt, showing that he can win with a little bit more than maybe he did coming out. Was very much a bull rush specialist coming out, but was working some swim moves on the guards of the Seahawks as kind of a situational interior rusher. But he's gotten some run defense snaps. He's held up adequately. He's just going to get a +1 here. He's a nice role player as a part of this edge/defensive end group, along with Zach Carter. Nothing crazy here, but is going to go up again. He went up last time. And I'm very low on Zach Carter. I would not say he's playing great or even good, but he's been a functional piece of an interior defensive line. He'll come in, has gotten some more defensive stops, a couple pressures. He's been fine, though he's kind of being forced onto the field because he was overdrafted. But hey, he's at least getting better from what he was last year, which was one of the worst players in football. Then into the secondary, Cam Taylor-Britt continues to impress, the year 2 second-round pick cornerback out of Nebraska. They have a bunch of dudes in this secondary, but Cam Taylor-Britt got to get healthy here. He's on the injury report, missed some time in that Bills game, but has been a very challenging corner for opponents to target. He's probably been their best cornerback, honestly, this season. He had a great game against Seattle, was playing well against Buffalo before he went down. So, Cam Taylor-Britt looks like a hit for the Bengals in year 2. And then the safety, Nick Scott, this Bengals front office has done a very good job with plugging holes through free agency over the Joe Burrow era, but the Nick Scott signing does not seem like that's going to be an example of that. Every single week, it feels like there's a couple big plays where he is just chasing wide open wide receivers, giving up big completions into his targeted area. He's been adequate against the run, but nothing special. Jordan Battle has gotten some more snaps lately. I just have a hard time believing he would be worse than Nick Scott. They like Nick Scott's headiness to run this complicated defense, but it does seem like the complications schematically in terms of asking these safeties to do everything and wear every type of hat has been a little bit too much for Nick Scott to handle. So I would like to see them fix this position a little bit before we get towards playoffs for the Bengals. Then we have the Buffalo Bills, whose star of the month is going to be first-round rookie tight end Dalton Kincaid. And really since week 7, the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen have remembered that they drafted a tight end in the first round that they wanted to use from the slot, in line, all over the place, to be that sort of almost Travis Kelce type of role within this offense, where he is going to be available underneath. He can be an easy outlet for Josh Allen in a pinch to prevent Josh Allen from making some of these big mistakes, pushing the ball downfield too much. And in the last 3 weeks, at least that bit of the offense has absolutely been there for the Bills. Josh Allen is doing a pretty good job taking care of the football, but Kincaid himself has been a target machine. Just in the last 3 weeks alone, we're looking at 26 targets for 23 receptions. Also 2 for 4 on his contested looks there, which is pretty solid. So the pick for a tight end in the first round, not always worth it for everybody, but it looks like the Bills had a plan here, how to use him, and he's performing well. Along with Khalil Shakir has really carved out a role within this offense as well. Similar kind of concept where they have a bunch of these nice outlets now for Allen. Obviously, Knox is there too. He's been injured a little bit this year, but then you got James Cook continues to do his thing. But Khalil Shakir from the slot has really held off Deontay Hardy in a way that I didn't expect. I thought Hardy was going to have a really nice season here, but Shakir, the year 2, day 3 rookie out of Boise State, who I compared at times to Golden Tate, is showing some of that stuff. The quick route running underneath. He's been elusive after the catch. and has been a more than practical slot wide receiver for Josh Allen. And then Spencer Brown, who I had tagged as the biggest question mark on the entire Buffalo Bills team coming into the year. The development has been there for Spencer Brown, which was, like I said, kind of the biggest thing that this team needed to see. We boosted him in the last episode of AFC Studs and Duds, and another 2 ratings boost here. He's just not been a problem for them. He's had occasional losses in pass protection. It's not that he's been elite, but he's been, above average, and he hasn't been the liability that he's been in years past. He's also seems to have kind of settled in within this blocking scheme a little bit more too. So we knew the athletic upside was there for Spencer Brown, and it's really good to see him trending towards reaching that upside a little bit more. But then you flip over to the defensive side of the ball, and AJ Epinesa is going to continue to climb incrementally after we boosted him 1 last time around. Now, he's been a little bit more polarizing. There's games where he's taken over. We talked about the Jags game in the last episode of AFC Studs and Duds, but this Week 6 performance against the New York Giants was dominant against, obviously, a piss-poor offensive line for the Giants, but still, you get credit for dominating a game in the way he did in that Giants game. But, he's also just kind of disappeared a lot of weeks, too. The last 3 weeks, we haven't really felt AJ Epinesa much at all outside of a cleanup sack against Tampa. I still think he's more of a 3 in terms of where you want him to be on your team, but he's shown that he can put on some pretty nice pass rush moves and kind of have those high effort pursuit sacks as well. So he's been solid. And then I do want to just talk about Von Miller. He has really been unimpactful since he came back. That was partially to be expected, but I did feel like I was one of a few people that pointed out, hey, he's going to be, 34 and a half years old coming off his second career ACL injury. A big part of my pessimism for this Bills defense was that I didn't really expect them to get much from Von Miller and didn't know what he was going to look like when he came back. He's been a complete shell of his old self, and I'm not quite ready to drop him yet because he's just coming back from that ACL injury. Could be saving something for the playoffs or something, but definitely worth noting that that's played out so far that he has not been a factor for this defense, even since he came back. But then into the second level, these linebackers have stepped up okay. Dorian Williams has been a little more hit or miss, but he has been that same guy I loved at Tulane, where he is just a piss missile to the football. He's had some exciting run stops. He's also been out of place in coverage and missed some tackles, so it hasn't been all pretty, but for a third-round rookie linebacker who's had to been kind of forced into action here, he's been okay. And then Tyrell Dodson, who's been around here for a couple years, he's gotten some spot starts back when they had both Milano and Edmonds, but obviously the Bills are flooded with opportunities in this linebacker room without both of those guys. And Dotson just looks the part. He's big. He can stuff the run. He's been a nice physical presence, kind of been that Edmonds type of presence. He's up there towards 240 pounds, which in terms of modern linebackers is above average size. But yeah, he's just been a very solid player. He's filled in nicely, needed a nice boost here. Could definitely continue to climb pretty fast here if he's playing at this level. Was rated pretty damn low there as just kind of an adequate backup coming into the year. But it's been much more than that so far. And then into the secondary, Christian Benford continues to hold off Kaiir Elam, which was a big surprise starting last year. That's continued into year 2. He's just been very solid. He'll get targeted a couple times a week. He's had some pass breakups. He's given up some yards in there. He's just been a very solid number 2 corner. I don't know how much he's going to continue to play now that they brought in Rasul Douglas, but it is nice depth nonetheless and a decent enough starter here in year 2. The pleasant surprise out of Villanova last year. And then this safety room continues to drop. We dropped Jordan Poyer a little bit last time around. And then this week, we're going to drop Taylor Rapp, who they thought was going to be kind of a nice, impactful third safety for them. Not only have they struggled to find a role for him within this defense, but when he's gotten out there, he's been targeted and given up a lot of yards. He hasn't been that kind of box, bandit, run defending thumper that maybe they thought he could be. He just has not been good for them at all. He's got to come down. And then Micah Hyde here, he's 33 coming off a serious injury. I think at this point, I still think he's a really good player, but probably living off of that epic 2021 season a little bit too much here, being rated up there as an 87. It's not so much that he's been horrible this year, but you have noticed, some of those plays where, think back to that Patriots game in 2021, the beautiful interception he had against Mac Jones in the corner of the end zone, where he showed that range. There's been a few plays, honestly, where it feels like that Micah Hyde isn't really there anymore, where instead he's arriving late and not quite arriving to the ball. In the secondary, you can't play great forever, and he is 33 coming off a serious injury. So I do think, there's been so many weeks now where I've thought about dropping Micah Hyde, even going back to early last year before the injury. And, it's time. Bills fans, it's time. He's no longer a top 5 to even 10 safety, I think, in the NFL. But there's your Bills. And then next we have the Denver Broncos, who, hey, they've won 2 out of their 3 games in this month stretch. A little bit of life in Denver here. And honestly, man, their star of the month here, Jaquan McMillan, has been a game changer for this defense. They had that historically bad start, but they get rid of their slot corner, Isang Bassi, who was a huge part of that Miami Dolphins game where they were getting ran all over, and they plug in Jaquan McMillan, who's a year 2 undrafted free agent out of East Carolina, and he has full stop been one of the best slot corners in the NFL in both phases of the game. And at first, when he stepped in, which was the last episode of Studs and Duds, it was really just his presence against the run, being a secure tackler and all that stuff. But in this stretch of games, which is really just 2 games against the Chiefs and the 1 game against the Packers, he's been very sound in coverage. Granted, a couple of bad targets where he did give up touchdowns. But beyond that, I mean, you're looking at a really nice pass breakup, the interception against the Chiefs, very sound. I mean, you're going to get targeted from the slot, and you're not always going to win. But if you can hold up relatively well, as he does, allowing just 8.3 yards per reception on the season, that's very good for slot cornerbacks. But then again, the run defense has just continued to be dominant from him. He now has 4 games on the season where he has 3 defensive stops. He's really coming down into the box and making himself felt down there. He's crashing on screens as well. He's got 25 total tackles on the season, and he's really only played 4 total games worth of snaps because he's not always on the field being a slot corner. Yeah, he's just been super impressive, man. An easy decision for star of the month for the Denver Broncos. But let's talk about this offense a little bit. And I do want to at least mention that Russell Wilson has settled in. And I think for the first episode of Studs and Duds since the calendar year 2021, he's not dropping in his ratings. He's been finally pretty solid, and I think he's settled in as kind of a mid-level quarterback. He's not quite the old Russell Wilson that he used to be in terms of play extension and, having that dominant deep ball, but there's some of that deep ball and play extension in there. He's kind of found a home within this offense and has helped this thing ride, if you will. So I just wanted to give him a little bit of love. He's not going to go up. It's nothing crazy, but maybe if he keeps playing like this, you could see some slight bumps. But then Jaleel McLaughlin, the undrafted rookie running back, at 5'9", 187 pounds, out of Youngstown State, the Penguins. Jaleel McLaughlin has been so fun within this offense. We know Sean Payton can use a scat back or 2 with his experience with guys like Darren Sproles and some of the ways they used Alvin Kamara. And McLaughlin's really been no different. He's kind of showing some Darren Sproles-esque tendencies right now. He's averaging 7 yards a pop on the ground, and has been a feature in the receiving game as well. He is, kind of a backup or a scat back / third down back option for Javonte Williams, who's been very good, by the way, getting healthier and healthier, it seems. So, in terms of volume, it's nothing crazy for McLaughlin, but clearly passes the eye test. He's got juice and is a weapon for this Broncos offense. It's not a coincidence that they've been winning a lot more games since they discovered this little feature in their offense. Very fun player. But then the pass protection as well has been pretty solid. Lloyd Cushenberry's been a big part of that. He had a huge test in this stretch of games, twice against Chris Jones, and then one time against Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt, which are a good pair of interior rushers for the Packers. And Lloyd Cushenberry locked down in all three performances. Cushenberry's just been steadily getting better year in, year out. He's in a contract season, and I think has kind of officially earned himself a large chunk of change for somebody, whether that's Denver here or somebody else. But next, let's talk about this defense a little bit more. Off the edge, Nick Bonitto continues to be a really explosive player. Now, so his 9 pressures against the Chiefs were impressive, but not in a way that you would typically talk about with these edge rushers getting a 9 pressure performance. But he is a unique weapon for the Broncos to deploy against someone like Patrick Mahomes, who has those deep drops in his footwork and will step up and start scrambling. And what they did with Nick Bonitto was just burn the edge, like just scream off the edge, make Mahomes feel like he has pressure, but contain rush too. Don't rush past the quarterback. And Bonitto so consistently was getting upfield in a way that against a lot of quarterbacks, the tackle would be able to just kind of flush him out of the pocket. But because of the way Mahomes operates, he would step up and start scrambling, thinking he has this huge escape lanes. But Nick Bonitto, who's one of the bendiest, most unique athletes at the edge position in the NFL, could just warp back inside and continue to put the pressure on Mahomes. So he had a really impressive performance in a unique way. Baron Browning did a lot of that as well in that second Chiefs game. But both these guys, I mean, I've said it before, I'll continue to reiterate, it's potentially the most athletic edge duo in the NFL. And if they're continuing to, refine their pass rush skill set and find a role within this defensive scheme that works, there's a lot of potential there, obviously. Baron Browning, I think, is a little bit ahead of the game in terms of pass rushing skill set. Bonitto is just going to kind of burn that edge and try to bend around the corner. Baron Browning has a variety of pass rush moves, which is impressive considering he was a linebacker convert last year. But a lot of people remember Baron Browning burst onto the scene early last season before going down for the year. Started the year with a suspension this year, but in his first 2 games back, I mean, it's not quite Micah Parsons, but it's very reminiscent of a Big Ten linebacker with freaky athleticism that came to the NFL, eventually switched to edge, and then started to package together some rush moves to become a real weapon. He's got a long way to go, and he's probably never going to be Micah Parsons, let's be honest, but there is sort of a script there for Baron Browning become a legitimate weapon for the Broncos. And in his first 2 games back, it has definitely been on the right trajectory. They also picked up Ronnie Perkins, who was a 3rd-round pick for the Patriots that I liked. Clearly just wasn't a great fit for Bill Belichick's defense out there. He barely ever played, but he's become a part of this rotation. He had a nice sack against the Packers. Just good to see him playing. Going to get a +1 here. Nothing crazy. He hasn't been super efficient or anything, but giving him a little bit of love. And then I also want to mention Zach Allen. Not going to quite go up. I thought about it. He's been very good. I wouldn't say he's been great, but he has probably been better than Draymond Jones. They let him go and then signed Zach Allen for a little bit less kind of big money. And that's definitely been a good decision. And the last few weeks, he has been even better as this defense has woken up a little bit and definitely could be due for a boost in the near future. And then they've cleaned some things up in the secondary as well. We talked in the last episode about this team probably needing to bench my guy, Damari Mathis. And they did. Fabian Moreau comes in. I don't know if he was on the roster or if they picked him up off the street recently, but he's been a journeyman veteran. He's started a lot of games, and he's been very hit or miss throughout his career, so I would expect him to probably have some bad games ahead of him at some point, but since he's been starting for this Broncos team, he's been very, very solid. I've always kind of liked Fabian Moreau for what he is. Atlanta, Washington, he's just been a good kind of fourth corner to have, and if you got to start him, you can kind of live with it. Giants too, I think, is where he was last year. He's carved out a nice little career. Former third-round pick with some size at the cornerback position. And then Kareem Jackson, if he could just stop hitting guys in the head late in the play and getting suspended for it, he's actually having a really good year here at 35 years old. They kind of, I don't know if it was a surprise necessarily that they brought him back, but I think a lot of people figured they were ready to kind of move towards the next chapter. But with Caden Stearns going down for the year, my God, they've needed Kareem Jackson, and he's actually played really well in coverage, other than the late hits and the targeting penalties and stuff. So they'll be missing him. I think he got a 2-game suspension, so he'll be missing one more week here. But yeah, 35 years old at safety, still been in position. He's got a couple interceptions, some pass breakups this year. He's been pretty solid. But next up, we have the Cleveland Browns. And for their star of the month, I tend to do this when someone enters the TFG 99 club and make them the star of the month. And we're going to do that with Myles Garrett, who deserves all of the praise he has received on the national scale this year. I know Steelers fans try to take it away from him because their guy in Pittsburgh's pretty damn good too. But, Myles Garrett has really married the perfect physical specimen for a pass rusher with his size and length and rare combination of speed and bend for the position, let alone what his size is. But he's married it with the skill set too, right? Like, it's not just the power rush that he was so good at coming out of Texas A&M. It's not just the speed to bend. It's knowing when he's got you beat with power and how he can counter off of that. It's him now using swim moves and spin moves better than he ever has. It's this system allowing him to rush from the inside. There's, that kind of viral clip of him, doing crossovers under, like, literal basketball crossovers before the snap because he's just in the center's head and already knows how he's going to beat the guy. Like, he is really at that level of pairing the physical with the mental / skill side of things. And it is really funny to see Steelers fans try to tear this guy down. But every time you see those graphs, whether it's like double team rate or pass rush win rate or whatever it is, those analytical grids where they put things into quadrants, Myles Garrett tends to be kind of grouped into his own little segment up in the corner of the graph. And you feel it when you watch him play. And even if the Browns offense has been borderline unwatchable at times, you can at least look forward to seeing Myles Garrett take the field more often than he would like because the offense has been so bad. But, he's just such a fun watch right now and truly on a defensive player of the year pace. I think he is going to have a significant drop in his play to not win it at this point. But just, Hall of Fame, all-time great type of stuff this year from Myles Garrett. It's been special to watch. I mean, even blocking field goals in that Colts game, that was kind of his defensive player of the year statement performance, where he was incredible in that game. Not just, 2 sacks, 5 huge pressures, but also a blocked field goal. The dude's just insane. Sometimes we gloss over these real superstars, but I wanted to spend some more time on Myles Garrett there. But let's talk about this offense a little bit. It's kind of tough. We're going to drop Elijah Moore by 2. We're going to drop Jordan Akins by 1. A little bit different circumstances here, but it's always tough to evaluate the receivers when the offense is as it's been with PJ Walker and Dorian Thompson-Robinson at times. These guys just aren't getting good looks, right? It's Amari Cooper, the run game, the screen game, and nothing else. So obviously their targets and opportunities have been less. But Especially in the case of Elijah Moore, it's just he's not been efficient with his targets. Even when he was with the Jets, it was like when they use him, he's explosive and dynamic and a problem for opposing defenses. The Browns trade a second-round pick for him, and he's been a below-average gadget receiver. Like, tell me the difference between Elijah Moore and, like, Brandon Powell for the Vikings. Other than Brandon Powell's arguably been better at making guys miss and converting stuff out of his targets. It just has not been worth the trade. There's just something missing with Elijah Moore, I would say. Clearly, something was awry with the Jets. Braxton Berrios constantly eating into his playing time. And now with the Browns, it's like, is he really all that good? I don't know, man. I hope that for his sake, the Browns offense can become a little bit more stable and traditional, and he can get his confidence back and be worth this pick for the Browns. But right now, it's kind of looking like a disaster acquisition. He's been nothing really that they couldn't have gotten off the street in insert X slot wide receiver. And then Jordan Akins, entering, he'll be 32 by season's end, had a nice year with Houston last year, just hasn't been as efficient as he was with Houston. I think it was time we dropped him. The secondary tight ends in Cleveland have not really been stepping up, whether that's Akins or Hunter Bryant. Both have been very mediocre. But on the offensive line, Ethan Pocic continues to dominate. What a pickup he's been. Slowly developed in Seattle to the point of being a starting caliber player, and now he has really, since he's been in Cleveland, graded out as one of the better centers in the National Football League. It certainly helps to have Wyatt Teller and Joel Bitonio next to you, helping out on double teams and creating drive in the run game. But he is definitely a good system fit with his athleticism, and has carved out a real nice career here heading into Cleveland. But let's talk about the defense. Starting up front, beyond Myles Garrett, Maurice Hurst going up again here. Nice, just sneaky pickup by this Browns front office. They made all these other moves, right? Zadarius Smith, Igbanya Okoronkwo. You got Shelby Harris, and of course Dalvin Tomlinson, who, by the way, is playing like Dalvin Tomlinson lately. But Maurice Hurst just kind of sneaks in here as a under-the-radar pickup, and he's been, honestly, a bigger impact for this defense than even Shelby Harris. And a big part of that is Hurst has actually been able to stay healthy in this rotational role. Health and availability have always been Maurice Hurst's biggest knock. When he's played, he's been pretty efficient, and now he's in a spot where, he can play 15, 20 snaps a game, and he just does a little bit of everything. He can get off blocks against the run. He's athletic. He's strong. He always reminded me of Grady Jarrett coming out of Michigan, and he's kind of been that type of player for the Browns. Honestly, it's just not on the scale of a Grady Jarrett who's going to play over 2 times the snaps that a Maurice Hurst does. But yeah, it's been a little bit of pass rushing here, a little bit of run defense there, a little bit of, interceptions. He picks off Geno Smith. Just been a really nice piece up front amidst this group, along with Igbanya Okoronkwo, who you can't overlook. Before Zadarius Smith became available, they were totally cool rolling into the year with Okoronkwo as their starter, opposite of Myles Garrett, and he probably would have been just fine. Honestly, he's not far behind Zadarius Smith in terms of, pass rush efficiency and pressures and sacks and all that stuff. Zadarius is going to play about 40 snaps a game. Okoronkwo about 30, 35, depending on the game script. So they're pretty close in terms of usage. So, he's a real player. I think a lot of teams are regretting not giving Okoronkwo the contract he got. 3 years, $19 million for a kind of low-end number 2 edge rusher is a very good price for the Browns, and he gets to be their 3. So, he's just been a ton of fun. And then, with the linebackers, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah has really come on lately. He was all over the field in coverage against the Niners. But he actually has been in a little bit of a rotational role. He hasn't been a true 3-down linebacker, but that's probably how you want to use JOK. Keep him healthy, keep him fresh. They do that really well with some of these guys like Mo Hurst and JOK, who have had a hard time staying on the field, but you reduce their snaps and the likelihood of you getting the best out of him is going to increase. So I love what they're doing there. But yeah, he's been flying around the field in coverage. He's been flying to the ball in the run game. He's just been that explosive Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah that we all loved coming out of Notre Dame. And then the safety, Grant Delpit, continues to play super well. The coverage has really shown up for him the last couple of weeks. Some of the missed tackle stuff it's tough. I don't want to say it's a problem for him, but that was like his big knock coming out of LSU was tackling consistency. It's been better this year, but still kind of like, do you really trust him to make that big stop on a third down? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But overall, he's been a plus safety for the Browns. He's been thriving back there. He's been a luxury for him to be playing as well as he has. I also want to mention Cameron Mitchell. He's gotten into the lineup the last couple of weeks. He was a 5th-round pick out of Northwestern, was kind of like if you just took Greg Newsome out of Northwestern, who's a really good corner for the Browns here, obviously. They spent a 1st-round pick on Newsome. Mitchell followed him up at Northwestern, might have even played with him a little bit, but same system, all that. Mitchell was like that same kind of off-zone, quick, kind of nice traits corner. If you just took Newsome and turned the dials down about 90%, to about 90%, down 10% in terms of size, athleticism, production, you would get Cam Mitchell. So it's been fun to see him step in and, really not miss a beat within this defense. Not going to go up because it's small snap count and all that stuff, but does look the part in the snaps he's gotten. Had a really nice pass breakup last week against the Cardinals, and he has actually rotated in and played, by the way, in all but one game this season, which is fascinating. So it definitely could be due for a bump if he's playing for one reason or another, whether it's as a dime corner or if someone gets hurt. But yeah, wanted to mention him. And then the kicker, Dustin Hopkins, having a really good year. He's 7 for 7 from 50-plus yards this year. It's really hard to do. So the veteran kicker has been a nice acquisition for the Browns. And next up, we have the Los Angeles Chargers, who are on a little bit of a hot streak here. But for their star of the month, it's actually going to be linebacker Kenneth Murray, the former 1st-round pick, who has definitely had his weeks throughout the years on this series of, I don't want to say necessarily getting roasted, but definitely getting dinged. And I do want to be careful because it's been about a month here of really good play. So I don't, small sample size, all that, but this has been a trend for years now. And for those following this series, this has been a heavy hitting note of give these linebackers until year 3, year 4, because this is a hard ass position to learn in the modern NFL that does a really good job of manipulating and targeting these linebackers. And Kenneth Murray has had his struggles, to say the absolute least. But man, the last couple of months, he has been a menace. He's got 19 defensive stops just in these last 4 weeks. He's got just 2 missed tackles to 32 total tackles. Had a beautiful pass breakup on the Bears, and has just been playing fast and looking like that physical presence that the Chargers probably wished they could have had 2 years ago. And that's why you don't draft these linebackers super high, because they do tend to have the Kenneth Murray career trajectory. But when it happens, it's really fun to watch. And I'm happy for the guy. I really hope he continues this pace. There's definitely a reality where it was just a fluky couple of games, and he continues to go back to the guy that struggled to break down the run and wasn't always in the best place in coverage. But it definitely feels like he's figuring some things out here in year 4, and we'll continue to monitor as the year goes on. But let's talk about this offense a little bit. I mean, there's not a ton to say about the offense, honestly. I think everybody's kind of playing up to their rating, if you will, for the most part. I mean, I am going to lower Justin Herbert, though, and I'm going to follow my eyes. I'm going to follow what I feel about Justin Herbert. I'm not going to be continuously bullied into this idea that Justin Herbert is like a, top tier or threatening the top tier type of quarterback. The reality is, this season, he has played much closer to a Dak Prescott or a Kirk Cousins than he has even remotely close to a Joe Burrow or a Josh Allen. He's been missing throws that he doesn't normally miss. He's been putting the ball in harm's way about twice as much as he did last year. He's already got almost the same amount of turnover-worthy plays as he had all of last season. He continues to come up short in these clutch moments, which I think is the buzzword that Chargers fans hate to hear people say about Justin Herbert. But when you're in a one-score game in the fourth quarter against the Chiefs, and it's a winnable game, and you're staring down Keenan Allen when you have Quentin Johnston in your field of vision screaming open into the second level, and you force it into traffic, and you end up punting and losing the game, it's like you do this way too often for me to feel like Justin Herbert deserves that 88 rating. No, he's much closer to me to like how Dak and some of those guys are playing right now. So I'd love for him to answer some of these questions and earn that rating back. But I mean, last year I stayed away from lowering him because he was dealing with the injury. Some of those same frustrations did show up, but with the injury, I wanted to be a little bit more cautious with it. But yeah, it's time, Chargers fans. It's time for Justin Herbert to play like the guy that a lot of Justin Herbert truthers try to bully people into believing he is. And he's the only guy moving on the offense here this week. I do have a couple notes, though. Donald Parham just continues to make plays when they call his number. I love Donald Parham. I think I have him rated fairly, but yeah, man, he's got 4 touchdowns on the year. He had a big game against the Bears. I don't know how necessarily they could get him more involved, and he is one of those guys, kind of like we just talked about with the Browns, where, you know, maybe the lower the snap count, the better, because he does tend to have some injury concerns. But yeah, I mean, he's 6'8", he's fast, he's super fun. Love me some Donald Parham. And then Austin Eckler, this is kind of like we just talked about with Herbert. I know he's kind of fighting back from this injury, but he has not been very efficient since he came back in, especially the receiving game just hasn't been good old Austin Eckler. But I don't want to lower him yet because I feel like he could get healthy and finish strong here in the second half of the year. But this defense has certainly turned things around a little bit in this 4-week stretch after a rough start. And I'm not ready to, sing the praises of Brandon Staley or anything, but I do think the players stepping up has been a big part of this. And I think it does kind of start with the edge group here. For one, Joey Bosa, you'll see down there in the notes category. We actually talked about potentially lowering him in the first episode of AFC Studs and Duds, but man, he turned it around. And the last 3 weeks, especially that Monday night game against the Jets, that might have been the best game Joey Bosa has had in 2 years. He has started to lose some of his luster, but a statement couple of weeks from Bosa, and if they're getting premium Joey Bosa, things just grow and evolve around him naturally, and I think that's a big part of what we're seeing. But Tuli Tuipulotu continues to play really well. The second-round rookie out of USC, his pressure has been fairly consistent. He hasn't been quite as good as he was in the first half of the year in terms of, sacks and pass rushing, but he has been a menace in run defense. So, he's playing really well. Just a really complete, awesome second-round pick by this Chargers team. And then Khalil Mack is playing better too. He had obviously that big game against the Raiders. I don't know if that was a confidence boost he needed or if they unlocked something or started doing something different with him. I can't answer that, but he has been much more of the player they hoped they were getting when they acquired him. He's been just kind of an average number 2, really, for the first 20 games or so of Khalil Mack. But the last month plus, he's been that sort of low-end number 1 that I think they thought they could still get out of Khalil Mack. So he's been awesome in both phases, run defense and pass rush. That trio is now, heading into the second half of the year, much more fascinating than they were maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And then next to Kenneth Murray, Eric Kendricks is playing much better. We actually lowered him last time, so he's going to get that U-turn. He's going to get what he had back. Been much more consistent as a run defender and continues to show that he is one of the more heady zone coverage linebackers in the league, getting very comfortable in this defense. So Kendricks, one of my favorite players of the decade, honestly. He's like teach tape for coverage linebackers, and it's really fun to see him continue to play well. I didn't like dropping him, but it was necessary, though. He's playing his best football in the last month that he has in really a couple of years, honestly, because he wasn't good for the Vikes last year either. But then into the secondary, Jasir Taylor is fascinating. He's been very polarizing. He has been a putrid run defender, which, as we know, the Chargers struggle in terms of physicality and run defense. And he's got an alarming number of missed tackles. But he's got a really impressive 6 pass breakups on the season and has had some really nice performances in coverage. So I don't quite know what to think of Taylor yet. He clearly can play a little bit. I just hope he can clean up his tackling right now, because he's missing 30% of his tackles this season for a Chargers team that loves to live in base nickel and has historically struggled against the run. It does worry me a little bit, but he deserves credit for kind of cracking the starting lineup here in year 2, a 6th-round pick last season. And, he's been all right. And then the safety, Alohi Gilman, going to continue to climb here. Just having a really good year. Now, granted, he's missed 2 games in the stretch. He only played weeks 8 and 9, but just continues to be a really instinctive, just all-around safety. And within this system, you're looking at a heady player in a contract year, by the way, that just is able to read the quarterback's mind, understand the rules of this match zone-based system, when to take risks, when not to take risks. He really has not given up any huge coverage busts or huge completions or anything like that. But, in that Bears game, just crashing downfield, blowing up the in-breaking route, kind of disrupts a ball that ends up landing in Derwin James's lap. Another great pass breakup against Zach Wilson and the Jets. So, he's just really playing well. He's been a pretty solid tackler as well and continues his ascension. It'll be interesting to see. I would assume the Chargers re-sign him for maybe a Juan Thornhill type of contract, 3 years, 23 or something like that. I'd say he's playing up to that as long as he stays healthy and continues to play well. But then Derwin James, look, I'm going to lower him, man. You guys that have been around the channel know Derwin is one of my favorite players in the NFL. He's on my Twitter banner. I've always stanned him as one of the top safeties in the league, but he just hasn't lived up to it this year, man. He's looks honestly a little bit lumbering on film. I kind of noticed it last year prepping for the deep dives too. I didn't really want to dig myself into a hole in case maybe he was playing hurt or something, but I just wasn't all that impressed by him even last year in coverage. And this year, he hasn't been in position, man. There's no way around it. And that Chiefs game especially, I get it. It's Travis Kelce, but he wasn't even close to being able to hang with him. And if you're the most expensive safety in the NFL, you should be able to match up in coverage on Travis Kelce. And if you're getting big bodied and he's going over you for catches, that's one thing. But if you can't even hang in your stickiness in coverage, come on. All year too, just 1 pass breakup on the season. It came week 1. He's still been a force against the run. I still think he's a great player, but we got to start having some conversations about Derwin. And he had his best game of the season, probably certainly his best game of the season against the Jets. Hopefully we see more of that. That game probably stopped him from getting a -2 here, but. Yeah, we had to have the Derwin James conversation there. There you go, -1. And then Cameron Dicker, the kicker, man, he's having an all-pro season. And Chargers fans, I'll try to keep it short so we don't jinx them, because we know how it goes with Chargers and special teams and kickers. But, man, he's missed 1 kick on the season. It was over 50-yard attempt at Minnesota. Other than that, he's been, perfect, literally. So, Texas has a good track record of kickers and punters. Cameron Dicker seems to be next in line there. He's getting a +5 this week. I mean, he could have been the freaking star of the month for them. He's been awesome. Next up, we have the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Star of the month here is going to be Rashee Rice, who goes up for the 2nd episode in a row. He is one of these prospects that is just completely different than what I saw on film and kind of what I expected, though when the Chiefs took him in the second round, I was like, wow, I can't wait to be wrong about this guy, and that's exactly how it's played out. And Chiefs fans did confirm something I asked. I can't remember if it was in the last episode or on the Fully Inflated Football podcast, which, by the way, I have a podcast if you want more of my analysis. Link in the description below, or just search Fully Inflated Football wherever you get your podcasts. But anyway, I was wondering if Rashee Rice lost weight, because when I watched him at SMU and at the Senior Bowl, up close and personal, about 10 feet from him, I was like, he is thick. He's built like James Washington was a few years ago, again, coming out of Oklahoma State. And his release package was one of the worst releases I've ever seen from a college prospect, and I'll stand by that. A lot of people confirmed in their scouting reports that he just does not beat press well. And I thought he didn't accelerate all that well and wasn't a very fluid athlete. Well, I see him in a Chiefs jersey, and he looks about 15 pounds less than he did at SMU. And he looks spry, and he accelerates so well into his routes, and especially what you notice is after the catch, he just explodes away from these pursuing defenders and burns angles. There's just so much more juice there. And that's game-changing because his ball skills were pretty damn nice, or at least his ability to high point the ball and come down with tough catches. We've seen some really nice touchdowns down in the red zone. He's been on the same page with Patrick Mahomes in scramble drill, which was something that at least I noted as a positive on his college scouting report. So that's shown up. He really has been basically Juju Smith-Schuster as a quasi-slot / perimeter possession receiver. And it hasn't been all perfect, but it definitely, he's been their best wide receiver outside of Kelsey. And man, did they need to hit on that pick, because the rest of these guys aren't really doing a whole lot for them. So he's just been a very pleasant surprise that I've enjoyed. Now, Justin Watson has played pretty well. He hurt his, I think, elbow pretty bad. I will say the aesthetic of him in the arm brace is definitely a good one for him. I would encourage him to stay with it, even if he doesn't need the elbow brace. But anyway, looks good on him. He's been making plays down the field, and he's been in this offense for a few years now, has definitely stepped up with this opportunity, and he's a nice little player for them. And then Jawan Taylor, the last offensive player we're going to talk about here, is going to get the U-turn here, getting one of his 2 ratings points back that we took away from him in the first episode. He was the highlight of the whole, false start, offsides debacle. And, he's settled back in. I don't know if he had to reshape his technique or how he approaches the game, or if they just haven't been calling his penalties as much. But regardless, he's been a pretty good tackle for them at right tackle. He's been what they were paying to get there. And most importantly, just 1 penalty in this month stretch here for Jawan Taylor after a grueling 10 penalties in his first 4 games. So that has come back around. Still not much of a run blocker here, but they haven't really had to worry about him at right tackle. And he's had to face, the Chargers and the Dolphins. He's had to go against some real players. So he's going to get one of those points back. Could easily come back to the 78 that he was if he keeps it up. But then onto the defensive side of the ball, which really has been the identity of this Chiefs team this season. First round pick from last year, George Karlaftis, continues his climb. He's going up 2 again this week. That's 4 on the season for the former first round pick. He's really figured things out. He's a very persistent rusher. He's got a little bit of power, a little bit of finesse. My man's up to 44 pressures on the season. That is good for 5th in the NFL. And it's not just cleanup work either. If you sort by true pass set pressures, which is like basically not play action, true one-on-one pass rush opportunities, he's 13th in pressures and 22nd in pass rush win rate in those true pass rush situations. So he really is winning his one-on-ones. He's been a very pleasant surprise off the edge for the Chiefs and returning dividends on that big first-round investment that they made in him. And then these linebackers, both Willie Gay and Leo Chenal, very different players. they've had to step up. Not that they weren't playing before, but they've really needed impacts in that second level of defense with Nick Bolton on short-term IR. And it's very fascinating how they're using these guys. They've actually really, their roles haven't changed that much. Drew Tranquill has stepped in Bolton's role as the 3-down linebacker. And Willie Gay is kind of their 3rd-down guy, their weak side backer. Leo Chenal is their strong side backer. Sometimes we'll even line up kind of on the line of scrimmage as a kind of quasi-edge player, and he's their rundowns linebacker. And that's a really smart way to use these guys, because Willie Gay, not necessarily the headiest linebacker. He's kind of one of those see-ball, hit-ball types. And when you get to just let him pin his ears back and find the ball and get a one-on-one assignment and play fast, he can do it really well. And he has been all over the field, was marvelous in that Dolphins game in Germany. And then Leo Chenal, if you put him in a situation where, he doesn't have to necessarily play in space, unlike Willie Gay, and he can thump and be that sledgehammer of a linebacker that he is, he's only 22 years old. He's still kind of learning the position. These guys are going to be set up to succeed, and they just have a ton of depth and talent in that group, even without Nick Bolton in there. And then you go to the secondary, where this group is incredibly underrated. Most of these guys just continue to play up to their standards, but the year 2 safety, Brian Cook, has been okay back there. I'm still just not the biggest Brian Cook fan. I don't feel like he's done a whole lot in terms of coverage, but you have felt him against the run much more lately. It is kind of interesting to me that he plays the majority of his snaps as the free safety, and Justin Reed plays more of his snaps as kind of that strong safety type. They'll rotate and do a little bit of everything, but I definitely thought it would be the other way around. Never really saw Brian Cook as a free safety. I feel like he's just kind of hanging out back there as, I don't want to say wasted space, but he's done his part. He's done what they've asked of him, which isn't much. And then Shamari Connor also was a 4th-round pick that was a name that surprised me when he came off the board. I didn't even have a draftable grade on him. It didn't really load up the all-22 on him. He was on nobody's radar, but clearly was on Brett Veach's radar as a really athletic hybrid defensive back that just needed a change of scenery. His physical profile was very similar to Juan Thornhill when you loaded it up, so it makes sense why they liked him after letting Thornhill go. And he hasn't been starting or anything like that, but he's been playing a little slot corner, a little dime slot, strong safety, a little bit of everything, that versatile defensive back role. He's got a great mentor in that role with Mike Edwards next to him. And when he's been in there, he's kind of splashed and shown some juice. So I wanted to raise him up, highlight him a little bit. They may have found something there. We'll see if his role expands into next year, because right now they already have 3 safeties ahead of him, 3 or 4 corners ahead of him. There's just not a lot of opportunity to go around, but he's definitely shown up in the games that he's been in there, and you've noticed him. And then I do want to say L'Jarius Sneed hasn't had his best season. I have so much confidence in his game that I think he'll have better games ahead, but he's given up some big plays and hasn't exactly been making a strong case to get a massive cornerback contract here in a contract year, but that is another reason why he just very well might turn this thing around in the second half. Okay, next we have the Indianapolis Colts, and Star of the Month was a tough choice for the Colts. They've had a lot of guys that are repeat upgraded players from our first episode, but I'm going to go with Bernard Raymond, the year 2 left tackle out of Central Michigan. He was a bit of a question mark coming into the year in terms of not can he play at a high level, but can he repeat the high level of play that he had in the second half of his rookie season last year. And my, oh my, yes, he has. I mean, for one, he's really just been a good run blocker from the get-go, and that's not a surprise for anybody that watched his Central Michigan tape. He just is a great athlete and has that dickhead mentality that you look for as a run blocker. So that has translated, but the pass protection has been really damn solid this year. I mean, he had a couple hiccups there against Myles Garrett and even Josh Allen for the Jags the week before that. Those have really been the only blemishes on his season. Otherwise, he's been really locked down for the Colts. And in those matchups, Raymond probably did fall, not just because he was a little bit of an older, smaller school prospect, but he does have shorter arm length. So when he gets up against Josh Allen and Myles Garrett, who have great arm length, that is going to be a little bit of a challenge for him, probably always. But otherwise, just such a technician, such a beast, and well-deserving of the Star of the Month for the Colts, because he's kind of answered a major question mark at a major position for this Colts team. That left tackle spot has been an issue for them since Costanzo retired, and they seem to have found their guy. And then also, with the offense, Josh Downs is going to continue to climb. He's been every single bit of that player he was at UNC, has been a super high floor, outstanding slot receiver. His incredible final season at UNC, where I think he had like one drop, if any, in his whole season, where he had like 100 receptions. Like, he really came out of his sophomore season where he actually had a bunch of drops and secured those hands up. And it was like, okay, is he going to go back to dropping balls? In the NFL, was his final season a fluke? Nope, he's got an incredibly secure pair of hands. He'll even be tough in traffic. I think he's 3 for 7 on contested catches, which is pretty damn good for a guy that's supposed to be small. He's just been so reliable. He's become more and more part of this offense until he got hurt in that Panthers game. But yeah, Josh Downs is freaking awesome, man. No reason he should have fallen as far as he did. And then Andrew Ogletree, the tight end for them, I think also out of Youngstown State. Had to double check that. Yeah, so they had some freaks, man, with Ogletree and McLaughlin for the Broncos. That might have been a fun team for you Youngstown State fans out there. But anyway, Ogletree missed his rookie season last year, generated some camp hype, and unfortunately missed the whole season. But man, they clearly saw something in him. He's 6'5", 260 pounds, totally looks the part. But he's been mauling dudes in the run game. He's been really answering the call every time they utilize him in the receiving game, and he's their number one tight end right now. Obviously, Jelani Woods has been out, but he's been out-snapping Mo Alley Cox. He's kind of taken his job, and they'll use Kylan Granson as well, but Ogletree is really their main Y tight end. So, yeah, he's been just a very pleasant surprise. I don't know if they knew he was going to be this good internally, but they're sure as hell happy to see it. And then on the offensive line, we've got some shakeup as well. So with the center and right guard, both Will Fries and Ryan Kelly have been really good. Will Fries had his hiccups in some tougher matchups, specifically this most recent week against the Panthers. Had a hard time dealing with Derek Brown there, which is fine for a low-level guard. Overall, it's a guy that's played a lot at this point. He's started games last year as well. He's a pretty good run blocker. He's a solid guard, though clearly he's probably going to have some weeks where you want to give him some extra help in pass pro. And that's why it's nice to have Ryan Kelly next to him. Really having I don't know if I want to say a career year, because he was kind of a Pro Bowl caliber guy out the gate as a first-round pick out of Alabama. But some injuries, among other things, some off-field tragedies, seem to have reduced his efficiency. But hey, man, he has been awesome this year at age 30. He's been mauling guys in the run game. He's been locked down as a pass protector. Genuinely looks like one of the best centers in the NFL again. Now, Quentin Nelson, on the other hand, a part of this is just kind of a macro look at Quentin Nelson just overall. He's one of these guys that he's a fan favorite. I love Quentin Nelson as much as the next guy. It's tough to come out here and say, yeah, Quentin Nelson needs to come down, because he's still a great player, but is he really a top 3 guard in the NFL at this point in time? I don't think his play over the last couple of seasons really justifies that. He's shown really throughout his career, honestly, that he's not a lockdown pass protector. This isn't Zach Martin that we're talking about, for example, in terms of pass protection. But I've been trying to find that nasty run blocker here in Quentin Nelson, and I just haven't seen it necessarily. Certainly not as consistently as he did kind of in those first couple years where everybody kind of crowned him the best guard in the NFL, and some people like myself were like, hold on, Zach Martin does still exist. And he's been kind of living off that pedigree for a long time. I still think he's really, really good. But do I think he's better than like Joe Thuney on the Chiefs right now? Joel Bitonio on the Browns? I don't know. And that's before we mention the true top guys like Chris Lindstrom and Zach Martin. Still love Big Q, though, and he's a huge asset for this team. But one other offensive player I want to mention here is Jonathan Taylor, who got that big contract extension. I don't necessarily want to lower him, but he hasn't been the monster, Jonathan Taylor, that was in 2021. And then last year happened where he was hurt, and the blocking was just so catastrophic last year that it was tough to really put the blame on him. The blocking, the scheme, it's all been much better here. And, he had one awesome game there in that Saints game, but, hasn't, again, been that max contract running back superstar necessarily since he's come back. I'm not quite ready to lower him yet, but he is on watch for the future. But let's talk about this defense, which has had some really fun performances. Let's actually just talk about some of these guys I have notes on in the front. So DeForest Buckner has had some monster games out there recently, but he's also had games where he's just disappeared. So I didn't quite feel it necessary to raise him, but the last couple of weeks he has been special, and if he's playing at that rate, he's going to go up in future episodes. I also want to mention one of my favorite rookies, Adetomiwa Adebawore, out of Northwestern, 4th-round pick steal, has barely played this year, but did get in there against the Panthers. Granted, that Panthers O-line is horrible, but Adebawore did get 3 pressures and a sack on 14 pass rush snaps against the Panthers. So want to see more of that from Adebawore. He could be a weapon for this pass rush. And then Tyquan Lewis as well. Not going to see an overall change. This is one of those Madden specific conversations here. Tyquan Lewis is trending up in terms of how valuable he is for the Colts and how good he is playing overall. But Madden does this archetype thing, and Tyquan Lewis has mostly just been a run defender for the Colts for years. But I had to crank up his pass rushing ability. Really applying pressure. He is well on his way to surpass his career total in terms of total pressures. His career year was 25 pressures in 2020, but he's already got 19 on about half as many snaps as he had in 2020. So he's well on his way to a nice 30 pressure, maybe even more when you look at the recency bias of things. He has 11, 12, 16 pressures in the last 5 weeks. That's really effective. So he's done that on top of being a good run defender. I like Tyquan Lewis. He's a very good third edge piece to have. He's got some size too, can rush from the interior when they want him. So their interior guys have been playing better in recent weeks. Granted, some of these old lines they've faced, Tennessee, New Orleans, Carolina, not the best competition, but that's part of them not going up. But yeah, they're playing well. But beyond the defensive line, we've got linebacker EJ Speed. Kind of continues to eat reps away from the linebackers there. It's all a big rotation right now. I'm sure there's some method to the madness, but when you watch the Colts play, it's kind of like these guys are all over the place. But EJ Speed has been flying to the run. He's been really good at getting off blocks, making defensive stops. They'll blitz him too. He's got 5 pressures and a sack. Really nice chess piece of a linebacker. He popped to me prepping for my Colts deep dive. A lot of you guys remember me breaking down this Colts linebacker room, and I was like, man, Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed can play. It doesn't even really matter what they get from Shaq Leonard. Leonard has been playing a little bit better the last couple weeks, though. That's worth noting. But into the secondary, I'm going to toot my own horn here. Jalen Jones was one of my guys. Thought he was a complete steal in the 7th round. I had him as kind of a late 3rd, early 4th round guy. Just loved his tape, man. He was a true junior coming out of Texas A&M, but was just a sticky coverage player. Reminded me a lot of a Rasul Douglas, maybe, where you can just tell he's anticipating routes and understands zone coverage and route combinations and all that stuff. Even if he didn't test well or wasn't the most traitsy prospect, I just thought his tape was so good. And I thought he was a nice balance in this Colts draft class where they took all these freaky athletes. And then in the 7th round, they're like, we're not just drafting off of RAS score. We'll take guys that have really good tape too, and that's what they did on Jalen Jones. They've needed him to step up big time because Dallas Flowers, who was the Colts star of the month in the last episode of Studs and Duds, and their second-round pick, Juju Brents, and they didn't keep Darius Rush around, their fifth-round cornerback, who was a freaky athlete. And Jalen Jones has really stepped in. He had a great game against the Carolina Panthers. They really haven't missed a beat with him in there. And I got to go back to my deep dive, but I'm pretty sure I said don't be surprised if Jalen Jones is better than Darius Rush as a rookie or even better than Julius Brents. So a little bit of a victory bell ringing moment on that one. But Kenny Moore, love what Kenny Moore is doing this year, man. He had a really down year last year. He really did, was giving up a ton of yardage last year. And what's cool is based on my memory, like a lot of times I felt like Kenny Moore was just getting kind of burnt on crossing routes and stuff. Well, he had that pick six against Bryce Young where he jumped a crossing route. So I can't say for sure that that's something he's worked on, is not getting, ran across the middle like that. But it was just kind of a nice redemption moment to see that. But he's been tackling better. He's been the best slot corner in the NFL this year. I don't think that's controversial to say. So yeah, he's been fantastic. And then Julian Blackmon as well. Contract year for him. Kind of an early, like a peaked in high school type for NFL safeties, maybe. I don't know. You know what I mean, though? Like, he came into the league, was awesome. Everyone was calling him a steal, and then he just disappeared for 2.5 seasons. Julian Blackmon is getting back to that freshman rookie form for him at the safety position. He's looked really good. Beautiful, rangy interception from the deep. I don't know if it was a deep half or a deep third interception, but either way, in the Browns game, just looking good, man. Should be heading towards a nice contract extension himself, given this is kind of his second good season out of 4, and trending in the right direction, obviously. Just 25 years old. So there are your Indianapolis Colts, who are having a nice kind of fun, evaluate everything before we get to next year with Anthony Richardson type of season. Next up, we have the Miami Dolphins. And for their star of the month, this was an easy choice because it's someone that I'm going to celebrate after I've been very critical of Bradley Chubb here, really since the Dolphins gave a first-round pick to go and get him. I thought it was an egregious overpay. I didn't think he was even remotely close to a pass rusher that you give up a first and then a massive contract for. And for about a full season going back to when the Dolphins acquired him, I was looking pretty good for that criticism. But I'll admit when I'm wrong. And the last 6 weeks, Bradley Chubb is on probably the best stretch of football of his entire career. It all starts with the pass rushing, of course, where he's got 26 pressures and 6 sacks in just 6 weeks. But he's also continued to be an excellent run defender and is on track for potentially his career high in defensive stops as well. They needed him to be this player for what they gave up to get him, but it is quite clear that in Vic Fangio's system that loves to just rush with 4 and let a guy like Bradley Chubb, who can win a one-on-one matchup and has power and different pass rush moves to work guys throughout the process of a game, he's definitely been re-unlocked, for lack of a better term, in Vic Fangio's defense. He's been awesome. So I wanted to give him his flowers when a lot of Dolphins fans know I have been very critical of the Bradley Chubb acquisition. It's starting to pay some returns for them. But as we transition to the offense, Tua is very well deserving of the star of the month as well. And hell, there might be some Dolphins fans that are mad that Tua doesn't get the star of the month. Their boy. But he just really does continue to impress me, man. And I've really opened up to the idea. I've talked about this in weeks past. I've kind of just opened up to the idea of who Tua is, especially when he's going to have the structure of this offense around him for the foreseeable future. But, we're always looking for those superpowers that a quarterback can bring to the table. What is it that he does beyond that of Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill? Those tend to be the cliches, right? You want those quarterbacks that bring something to the table that a normal quarterback wouldn't bring to the offense. And for a little while, we weren't quite sure what that was with Tua. But honestly, there's a few things now. Last year I talked about how his ability down in the red zone was really impressive, where he's got enough pocket presence and that kind of it factor to manipulate the pocket and buy time to get high percentage throwing windows down in the red zone where things get tight. I think Tua still has that, and he's shown it even more on some big third downs this year. So that's been there. Like, when the structure is not there, he's brought a little bit to the table. That's a little bit of the Brock Purdy conversation. We've discussed that with what he's bringing to San Francisco. But this year, it's been even more than that. He is second in the NFL in big-time throws, a PFF stat to kind of show you when a quarterback is going above and beyond of an expected throw, so to speak. He's already got more big-time throws this year than he did last year in total on about 100 less attempts. So he's pushing the ball downfield with accuracy. That's obviously impressive. But then maybe the biggest of all is just how quickly that ball is getting out of his hands. He's down to 2.31 seconds average time to throw, which is the best in the NFL. And it just, that brings so many things to the table. You're hitting quick strikes before the defense is kind of in position or able to read your eyes and make a play on the ball. But more importantly, it protects the offensive line in a big way. That was a huge question mark coming into the season, was how is this group going to hold up? And if you put this offensive line in front of most systems and most quarterbacks in the NFL, you might get a lot more sacks and negative plays than what you're getting with Tua in how urgent he's able to read the defense and get the ball out with his quick release as well. A lot of times he's just hitting the top of his drop and the ball's already out. It's really impressive what he does there. So, you're, like I said, you're looking for those superpowers. Tua's starting to show them. Now, there is a trade-off with the anticipation throwing that he has, and that is pretty much once a game for the most part. He's going to put the ball in harm's way. We saw in that Eagles game, it was a costly game-ending interception, more or less. But that is just something that I think is going to be a part of Tua's game unless he weeds that out as well, which would be a huge difference maker. But at this point in time, it is like once a week where you're kind of like, oh, Tua, what was the thought process on that one? But I do think he's a top 10 quarterback. I think he's been exceptional and deserves his credit as well. But then Raheem Mostert, I tweeted this out yesterday, but let me know in the comments down below, has there ever been anything close to this? A 31-year-old running back breaking out as like a top 5 running back in the NFL. It's insane. And he's been good before, don't get me wrong, and part of it is injuries have held him back, but it's so much more than that. He's so much different than he ever was as a running back. And there was flashes of this last year as he was a part of a rotation. But he's been more durable, in part because he's put on weight. He's bigger. He's fourth in the damn NFL in missed tackles forced and yards after contact. Like, this isn't just, Mike McDaniel scheming him wide open rush lanes for him to scream through with his speed, like maybe you would have thought about a little bit more with him in San Francisco. He's creating a lot of this offense, and it's remarkable. I don't really know what to do with this. A guy that's going to be 32 at the end of the season, having the best year of his career by far. He's just blown me away with his growth at this age. So a tip of the cap to Raheem Mostert. And then the one offensive lineman that is going to go up here is Austin Jackson, the former first-round pick. Does seem to have settled in here in year 4. I will reiterate some of the points of how this offense kind of protects these offensive linemen. They just don't have as many traditional pass sets and opportunities to have ugly losses as a lot of other offensive linemen in other systems. So it's, you got to kind of take that in stride with him also playing well. I think it's a balance there, but clearly he's playing better than he ever has. He's only 24 years old, was a former first-round pick with the athletic tools to turn into a good player. So he's finally climbing up really for the first time in his career. And when you factor in health, he's been really one of the more stable forces for this offensive line. There's been a lot of guys in and out of the lineup. He's been a luxury. Then I also just wanted to note Cedric Wilson. They remembered, I guess, that they had signed him to a decent free agent contract after a good year in Dallas. I don't know if Mike McDaniel just got bored with him because he doesn't run in the 4-3s or what, but he has almost as many receptions in the last 5 weeks, I think, than he did all of last season. And, he's been kind of getting open in the middle of the field, making some tough catches, just been a nice kind of third piece that they've been looking for, right? Robbie Anderson, Chase Claypool, they've gone through all these guys, Braxton Berrios. They forgot about the guy that they paid the most money to out of all these guys. And spoiler alert, that's the guy that is going to be the best for you. So I just think it's kind of funny, but he's finally looking more like that guy in Dallas and might be due for a boost next time around. But let's talk about this defense a little bit more. I do want to talk about both of these kind of defensive end IDL types, both Zach Sealer and Emmanuel Ogbah. I do think these two players are hurting a little bit from being outside of the Brian Flores defense. Brian Flores and the system that followed into last year with McDaniel as the head coach under Josh Boyer, I think was the DC. But that's a Belichick system where there's typically one of these kind of undersized hybrid defensive end types that can man a sort of 4-eye position up front, and it's a really good spot for these kind of quick gap shooting defensive tackles to not have to face a lot of double teams and just play aggressive and use their best traits. Whereas this is a Fangio defense. He's going to want to run a lot of 4-2 base nickel, and he's had to ask Zach Sealer to be much more of a true 3 technique. And while he's still finding ways to knife into the backfield and make defensive stops and splash plays, it is hurting his grading profile because he's in a position, a formational choice or a scheme choice by the defense where he is going to have to anchor more, and he's not anchoring as well as you'd like for a player at that position. So his down-to-down impact as a run defender has taken a very significant hit in this system. He's still been a pretty solid pass rusher. I'm not saying he wasn't worth the contract they paid him, but it was something I noted when they signed him was, is he going to be as good in a Fangio defense? And probably not in terms of being a two-way defensive tackle. And then Emmanuel Ogbah is really hurting because, Sealer, at least he can strike his hands and shed a block and get off if he's one-on-one. Emmanuel Ogbah is a true, this is almost identical to Trey Flowers, who was awesome in New England. Granted, for some reason wasn't as good in Detroit either, but there is a specific scheme fit for these 6'3", 280-pound defensive ends in a Belichick-style system. Dietrich Wise, another example. Ogbah in this system is basically just a rotational, situational pass rushing 3 technique. They don't really need that because Wilkins and Sealer play a shit ton. So part of this is scheme, but when he's been out there, he has been just getting bullied against the run like crazy, and it's hurt his ability to get on the field. He's just not much of a player for them. The signs were there for this last year too. He did drop off after getting that contract. So this really is kind of an unfortunate story of a guy that, from the Dolphins' perspective, I suppose, got paid at the worst possible time. They had picked him up kind of off the chopping block. He had a breakout year in a system that worked perfect for him. He got paid, he got hurt, he got worse, and then they changed schemes and they don't have a use for him, and he's making like $17 million per. So it's really unfortunate. He has had a very quick fall from grace, really from the second they paid him. Fortunately, they've found value in other areas. Then the linebacker David Long, who they signed from Tennessee, is settling in and having a really nice year here, kind of change into this Fangio-style system. He's just flying to the football, man. He is the definition of plays with his hair on fire. He is that always in his mind, always going to be that undersized 5'11", 225-pound linebacker that has to prove it seemingly every single snap, and it shows. I mean, his pursuit speed, his trigger, it is fast. Now, occasionally, it'll lead to some lack of gap discipline and blowing some lanes, but he's pretty damn good at knowing when to trigger, where to trigger. He's just having another really good year. He's been a very nice linebacker. Even though the coverage side of things is very much hit or miss, and it's been more miss than hit this season. But then on the back end, I continue to applaud Vic Fangio for going with Deshaun Elliott over Brian Flores' pet project, Brandon Jones. Never understood that. Deshaun Elliott is a pro safety back there. You put him in a hybrid kind of quarters heavy, split safety, zone heavy defense, and Deshaun Elliott is a guy that, those types of systems don't demand a lot of range from a free safety, so to speak. It's a lot more kind of two-shell situations where you don't need to patrol the whole middle of the field, just a half of the field. And that's definitely a good fit for Deshaun Elliott, where he can use his mind, trigger quickly, and be a really good force against the run, too. He's a really consistent tackler coming downfield. So this was just very good pro scouting paired with a good scheme fit. Elliott hasn't really ever played in a true Fangio-style defense, but it does just kind of make sense now that we've seen it play out that he's a good fit here. And then the punter, Jake Bailey, who was really good early in his career for Detroit and then wasn't good. They let him go. Now he's in Miami. Second in the NFL in average hang time. I think he's PFF's sixth highest rated punter, something like that. So he's been damn good on the occasion that the Dolphins actually have to punt, which in a lot of these games hasn't been a lot of them. But let's move on to our next team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this team is the hottest team in the NFL, the longest win streak in the league. And a lot of people have said that I haven't been talking enough about the Jags. So it's a good month for them, a lot of movement, a lot of players to talk about, and a lot of guys stepping up, playing well, contributing to this win streak. Maybe none other than the star of the month here, cornerback Darius Williams, who's going to get a +2 this month. That's 3 on the season now. And we talked in the last episode about how they moved him back to the outside last season after they signed him to a nice contract from the Rams. They typecasted him into the slot as a 5'9" corner. He struggled. They put him back outside where he's played great, and surprise, surprise, he balled out. Fast forward to this season, he's back on the outside playing well. But this year, it's gone even beyond that. And maybe +2 isn't even enough for a, 30-year-old late career breakout cornerback here, up to an 82 rating, because he legitimately through the first half of the season has been the best cornerback in the NFL, statistically speaking. Whatever you really want to look at, he leads the NFL in pass breakups by 2, even though he's played less games than most of the league leaders. He has no penalties on the season. He's been targeted a lot, 11th in the NFL in total targets. And total yards allowed, he is up there, to be fair, because he is getting targeted so much. But he keeps denying people. I mentioned those pass breakups, but he is 112th in the NFL in quarterback rating when targeted. So that's just a good reflection of his value to this defense. They're trying to target him, but quarterbacks are not having success. He has 3 interceptions, which is tied for 3rd in the NFL. He's also missed just 1 tackle on the season, which is some of the best tackling you'll see among corners in the NFL. If you want to use PFF tackle grade, for example, he is 4th in the NFL. So it really has been a sensational sort of re-breakout for Darius Williams. And we're going to have a lot of other guys to talk about on this defense momentarily, but there is some offensive movement as well. I feel like the offense has been kind of status quo for the most part. whereas the defense has really kicked it up a gear this season. But Travis Etienne, talk about kicking it up a gear. He's just been kind of the engine of this offense, which is ironic because he was Urban Meyer's guy. But yeah, they've, running, he's been mostly the same, a really good running back. But he's been way more involved as a receiving back. He's already closing in on his receiving numbers from last season here at the midway point in this season. Had that awesome touchdown against the Steelers where he's lined up outside and just runs up the seam, catches a touchdown, takes it to the house. That's been an addition to his game. But yeah, just overall, Travis Etienne climbing up the running back ranks this year. Unlike Calvin Ridley, who I would say to this point, halfway through the year, has been a pretty big disappointment. He's had a couple big games, and most recently, he played well against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But there was so much excitement for him coming in, kind of being the route runner and the quote-unquote number one guy for this offense. And, man, it just hasn't worked out. There's been so many shortages with the Calvin Ridley experience, whether it's frustrating drops in critical situations, mostly early in the season. They haven't quite shown up recently, but that's always been a part of Calvin Ridley's game, is frustrating drops. But contested catches, he is 2 for 10 on contested catches. That's horrible for a number one wide receiver. He's also just had a bunch of situations where he's not on the same page with Trevor Lawrence, where Lawrence is maybe throwing a comebacker and Ridley's not stopping, or the spacing's a little bit off. It has not been what they hoped they were getting in Calvin Ridley. And it's going to get even more interesting because they have draft capital incentives to not extend Calvin Ridley. That was cooked into the trade, was if they don't extend him, or rather, if they do extend him, I think it was a second-round pick that they have to give to the Falcons. At this point, I would not give up a second-round pick for this version of Calvin Ridley. He's going to have to play a lot better. But some of these offensive linemen are playing well. I actually like how this O-line is shaping up after they just went out and got Ezra Cleveland. So Cam Robinson has settled back in at left tackle. He's been very good coming off the suspension, probably playing the best football of his career at left tackle, perhaps being a little bit motivated by some, they've got Walker Little there who's played well. They've got the first-round rookie Anton Harrison. So, he seems to be holding on to that left tackle job. And then at right guard, Brandon Sheriff is back to looking more and more like the guy they thought they were paying big money in free agency. Last year, he was just kind of a league average guard. I was worried about some potential regression for Brandon Sheriff. But when I did talk about that in my Jags deep dive, a lot of Jags fans pointed out that he was playing injured. So this year, looks a lot healthier. He has been a rock in pass protection, been moving people a little bit better for Travis Etienne and co in the run game as well. So he's paying back dividends on that big contract. The O-line getting some boosts there. And then let's go back to this defense, because this has been a really growing defense, and especially in terms of their pass defense. And there's a lot of names to give credit to. We already talked about Darius Williams maybe being the biggest force in terms of how great they've been against the pass, but Josh Allen up front just continues to evolve and grow. His career trajectory is just so satisfying. You always dream of drafting the more raw, athletic pass rusher, and you dream of them just getting better every year to the point that in year 4, they're a, elite pass rusher. And Josh Allen is very much encroaching on elite pass rushing territory. Now, this is kind of the year of the pass rusher, so how many guys can we really say are elite? Right now, this year, it feels like there's 12 of them, but Josh Allen, numbers-wise, is up there. And in fact, in the last 3 games, the dude's got 20 pressures and 4 sacks. So he's been really awesome. He's going up again here. And then you get to the second level, and what's crazy is it's just him. Trayvon Walker not really doing anything. They still haven't gotten Devon Hamilton back. I'm not sure what his status is. I would love to know in the comments if Jags fans could let me know if he's coming back, because he's a good player. Lorenzo Fatukasi has played better the last couple of weeks. He was a big free agent signing. He's not going to go up quite yet, but that's been good to see. But yeah, it's been just Josh Allen and company up front. But these linebackers are playing great. Foyesade Oluokun just continues to settle in. His comfort in this system is so clear. He flies to the ball. He led the NFL in tackles last year, I believe, for whatever that's worth. But we've seen some really sensational pass breakups in the last 2 of the last 3 games, showing off some of the range and coverage and instincts in that phase too, where he has, I wouldn't say I always viewed him as a great coverage linebacker, even though he is this kind of athletic, quote-unquote, undersized linebacker, though I do want to point out that he has bulked up significantly. He's not that 6'1", 215-pound athlete out of Yale that ran like a 4.5 flat anymore. I don't see the same speed from him when I watch him play, but I think it's made him a better, more well-rounded player and has helped him be a better thumper and full 3-down linebacker. So it is just a note on him. I actually lowered his speed, if you want to talk about this being a Madden roster, but an increase in strength and block shedding and those aspects of the linebacker position. And then Devin Lloyd, this is the Devin Lloyd that I thought was the number 1 linebacker in the draft, that had a unique trait about him. He's got 7 freaking pass breakups this season. That's insane. A lot of linebackers will go, full contracts without 7 pass breakups. He's done it in 8 games. And that's something he did at Utah. He had rare zone feel. That he's got the lengthy arms. He kind of drifts in zone, obviously, kind of flows with those in-breaking routes and just feels out the quarterback and just gets in the way of passing lanes better than most linebackers I've really ever watched. And there was some of that in his rookie year, but he was so bad in terms of run defense and tackling consistency that they actually started to rotate him with Chad Muma, who was a little bit better in that facet last year. But Lloyd has clearly taken this job. He's just been an incredible coverage player. And that's fine next to Aluko. And it's funny because when you look at their listed height and weight, you wouldn't think Lloyd is the better coverage player and Aluakun is the better run stuffer, but that kind of is how it works out. Now, Aluakun is the one you would want to man up like a tight end with, for example, because Lloyd is still not very athletic. But anyway, Lloyd's just been fantastic. I considered him for Star of the Month as well. They've been very happy to get something back for that first-round pick after it wasn't looking great in the first year. But then more guys in the secondary continue to step up. Monteric Brown, this is what it is. He's playing. He was rated as a 64. He had one good performance, really, in that New Orleans game. Had a couple of pass breakups, held up okay. The rest of it, they've been targeting him and having success. So, giving up 3 touchdowns in each of his 3 starts, that's not ideal. He's a backup, but he's shown that, he can plug in and be okay. He's also been a horrible tackler. So nothing crazy there, but just mention him. And then the slot corner, Trey Herndon, is probably having his best season as well as a coverage player. He's been really fun. He's been on this team forever, and he's kind of played a little bit everywhere. He's obviously played in a couple different systems, but very heady corner, quick corner in the slot. He's been a good coverage player. And then Andre Sisco, beautiful interception on Gardner Minshew, showing off the range. He's just been a really nice coverage player on the back end. He was such a fun prospect, and it's been fun to see him continue to kind of develop his feel back there and coverage instincts. He's been a little week to week in terms of run support. He's very aggressive, but you'll live with that when he's making plays on the back end. So he's having a great year. And then the kicker, Brandon McManus, had a down year in Denver last year. They let him go, and he's right back to looking like one of the better kickers in the league. He's been virtually automatic this year. So there's your Jacksonville Jaguars, Jags fans. I hope that was sufficient in terms of coverage of your team for the week. Next, we have the New York Jets, and I'm just going to start on the full defensive side of the ball because that's where this has been fun. And God, I know it's been said a million times, but God, it is just so tragic that we didn't get to see a full season of Aaron Rodgers with this team, and maybe they can make this thing work. But God, this defense is incredible, and the fact that they have some of these guys playing at the level that they're playing that they might have not even really expected it from, it's just kind of a cheat code, man. Bryce Huff, the Star of the Month, could have gone with a number of these defensive players for Star of the Month, honestly, but I'm going to choose to highlight Bryce Huff, the one NFL player that follows me, because I was hyping him up pre-draft saying, how did this guy not even get invited to the combine, let alone not get drafted? And God, he has made the NFL look freaking stupid. They've even made the Jets look stupid for not extending him when they probably could have, because he was pretty good last year. They probably could have got him in here for 3 years, $19 million, kind of the Ogbonnia-Okoronkwo contract. That's not happening anymore. He is heading towards Trey Hendrickson territory, where he's not like a full-time starter, but gets signed to a pretty big contract somewhere. Could be with the Jets. But, he's heading towards an opportunity to be a full-time starter at some point. Now, fortunately here for the Jets, he hasn't had to do that. But what's crazy is just 150-something pass rush snaps on the season for Bryce Huff. And he has 44 pressures. That's a pressure rate of almost a third, 33%. 1 out of 3 times he's on the field, he's speeding up the quarterback. That's absurd stuff. And he's just like he did at Memphis. He's got the complete package. He's compact. He's got a great get off. He's got enough bulk to bull rush, enough bend to speed to bend around the edge. And he's got a little bit of finesse in there too. So he is just awesome. So happy for my dude, Bryce Huff. Now let's just keep rolling through this defense. I mean, even a guy like Quentin Jefferson, he is having one of his best seasons of his long career at this point, playing in these kind of Seattle 3 tree branch defenses. This isn't really a true Seattle 3 defense anymore, but he's got a bunch of pressures. He's playing well. Jermaine Johnson, their first-round pick last year, has really come on. I compared him to Shaq Lawson on smelling salts, and that's kind of what we've seen from him. Shaq Lawson, I think, was a first-round pick for the Jets, right? So Jets fans are familiar. Has always been a good run defender, a thick, bulky, physical player. But Jermaine Johnson has that tenacity and effort to get after the quarterback, and it's really been unlocked here. He's been awesome in the last 3 weeks, and definitely looks like he's going to be worth it for them as a first-round pick, and he's just another piece of the puzzle here with this incredible pass rush. But it doesn't start with the guys up front. It doesn't stop with the guys up front. You've got these 2 linebackers, C.J. Mosley and Quincy Williams. Maybe from a, on paper perspective, if you will, you wouldn't say this is up there with the Ravens and the 49ers in terms of the best linebacker duos in the NFL, but they are sure as hell playing like it this season. And I'm really happy that I kind of pumped the brakes on some of the C.J. Mosley hate that existed over the last few years, because when you watch his film, the dude clearly is one of the smartest linebackers in the NFL, kind of like we just talked about with Devin Lloyd, kind of flowing in coverage. C.J. Mosley is really good at picking up in-breaking routes and covering players, not grass. Even if he's not the fastest guy on the field, he understands the coverage aspect of things. And then he is kind of the, he's the green dot. He's the guy that gets everybody in the right place. He makes checks, and, he's the guy that, I can't confirm this, but I can only speculate that Robert Saleh is going to have some calls where it's like, okay, this is so-and-so coverage, but based on how the opponent's formation is, we're going to check into something else. And C.J. Mosley, I can only imagine, is the guy that's making those checks and changes. So he's just such a key piece to this defense, and he's just thriving around with all these guys around him, as is Quincy Williams, who's like the perfect complement to C.J. Mosley. Hey, 5'11", 225 linebacker with blazing speed that loves to hit more than pretty much any linebacker in the league, and arrives like a sledgehammer when he does connect. I mean, that's perfect with all of the space that gets opened up front with all these guys. With C.J. Mosley next to him, kind of being the disciplined linebacker, Quincy Williams just flies the freaking heck around, man. He has been so fun to watch. Then you get to the secondary. I mean, just as a baseline, Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed continue to be the best cornerback duo in the NFL. Full stop, no pause, period, no argument. Like, it's over. Like, this is it. You have the best cornerback in the NFL this year. I know we just said Darius Williams statistically is playing like the best corner in the NFL, but Sauce just isn't even getting targeted anymore. He's allowed over, it's like 38% of the yardage that Darius Williams has allowed, and we just talked about how good Darius Williams has been playing. He put Quentin Johnston in a freaking box and packaged him away and put him in the locker room on Monday night. He's just so damn good. I don't get how he's so technically sound for such a young corner. Like, he just does not mess up. It's crazy. And then you got DJ Reed, who's also playing like a top 5 corner again this year, just like he did last year. Now, of course, having the pass rush up front in this scheme around it to help these guys benefits them, but they're a huge part of this. So DJ Reed has just, again, been incredible, and he himself is barely allowing any yardage this season. So those guys have been great, but even in like a game against the Eagles, they get Craig James, who's their 5th or 6th corner with Echols out, and he steps in that game against the Eagles. He starts next to Bryce Hall, who's been on this team. He played well in that Eagles game, reminded us that he's like the ideal backup corner. Could probably start for a lot of teams in the NFL. Another guy that's going to get paid a lot somewhere else. But Craig James started on the other side of him, and he held up against his former team in that game against the Eagles that the Jets won because of their defense. So, I mean, just it goes on and on and on. I mean, Quinnen Williams is playing well. Like, man, it's crazy. And even their special teams, like their punter went up in our last episode of Studs and Duds, and Greg Zuerlein has been automatic lately. So it's just been all good for the New York Jets other than the offense, which is obviously a key piece of this. Really, nobody is playing all that well outside of Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. It definitely gets confusing with all the BHs in here that just trade first and last names around, it seems like. But anyway, I mean, Michael Carter, they continue to get involved. I imagine that's part of Dalvin Cook's frustrations, not just that they're feeding Hall at running back, but Michael Carter continues to play, and he's got 2 drops on the season, just 1 missed tackle forced on, I think, 15 or 17 receptions. That's really bad for a guy like Michael Carter that you expect to be kind of that elusive scat back out of the backfield, not bringing anything to the table in the run game. He's just been bad. Like, there's no way around it. He's got to come down. The 2 offensive linemen here, too, the left guard and center, veterans, Laken Tomlinson and Connor McGovern. I mean, everyone else is getting hurt, and then the 2 staples you thought you had have been playing like booty cheeks this year. Laken Tomlinson, it's just time to lower him, man. I know he's got garbage around him, but he himself has been losing at a concerning rate. And then Connor McGovern has really regressed back to what he was several years ago, where he can't hold his own in pass protection. So they continue to have issues with the O-line. The one guy playing well, or at least well enough to go up, is going to be CJ Uzomah, who's out there mauling dudes in the run game, playing his role as their kind of quasi-starting tight end. So he's going to go up. He's blocking way better than he ever has in his career, and that's good to see because he's north of 270 pounds. You would expect that he can kind of play that Mercedes Lewis role, if you will, in this kind of Packers-inspired offense. But there's your New York Jets. It's crazy how polarizing the offense is versus the defense. I would love to just see one of these practices and see how much they just dunk on the offense every week. Next up, we have the New England Patriots, which are another kind of depressing team in a lot of ways. A lot of players falling here again in Studs and Duds. But let's start on a positive note with the star of the month, rookie wide receiver, Demario Douglas, undersized, 5th-round pick out of Liberty. He's the star of the month because he is the only semblance of a down-the-field passing game that they have. It's not, running go balls or anything. It's crossing routes and stuff like that. But, man, he's got speed. He's got route running. He has shown very secure hands. He was a really fun watch coming out of college, and they've needed someone because all of these wide receivers, Juju, Devontae Parker, even a little bit of Kendrick Bourne when he was healthy. By the way, Bourne's not going up because he's going to have to recover from that injury. But, they've desperately needed somebody with a little bit of juice, and this isn't going to stop anytime soon. They need Demario Douglas just to move the damn football through the air. So he's been an absolute luxury for this team. in the biggest of ways, because as you see here, they're not getting much help from these wide receivers. But let's stay on a positive note here. Ramondre Stevenson has really turned it back on this last month after we lowered him in the last episode. He's had an explosive run every week. He's been much more involved in the receiving game, breaking tackles, looking like that Ramondre Stevenson that we expected to have a big year here this year. It's finally back on track here. But yeah, let's talk about those wide receivers a little bit more. Both Juju and Devontae Parker got to come down. I mean, Juju feels like a street free agent nobody right now. He can't separate. He's dropping the ball. There's just nothing there. Now, he is coming off his best performance this most recent week that might save him from a -2 here this week, but you also have the reports that he's got some potentially degenerative injury issues, I think in his knee, which obviously sucks for Juju if that's true, but it does definitely coincide with him slowing down and not providing nearly what they paid him to do here. So he's coming down again. And then Devontae Parker, where are you at, dude? Like, what happened to, baby T. Higgins or, that kind of tier 2 X wide receiver, if you will, that Devontae Parker has kind of been here for the Patriots? He almost feels like checked out. He drops that potential game winner against the Raiders, like just nothing going for Devontae Parker. It's brutal. He's got to come down as well. Now, Farrell Brown, it's funny how he's been like, I don't know what to do with Farrell Brown is what I'm saying, because he is the highest graded tight end in the NFL per Pro Football Focus. He gets like 7 snaps a game, and he's made, in this month of football, he's made 2 of the best plays through the air that we'll see this season. Like, he has had some incredible catches. He looks tough and big after the catch, but he's their tight end 3 and barely plays. He has been blocking when he's been in as well. So just a +1 for Farrell Brown. A big boost to his spectacular catch rating, I'll say that, for the Madden players out there. But then City So has been a nice little pleasant midseason addition, if you will. He was a rookie that started in week 1 and got just decimated by Jalen Carter. And then he took a seat for about 5 weeks, but he came back in, I think it was week 6. But he's been much better there at right guard. And they have since slid, by the way, Mike Nwenu permanently to right tackle per his request. So City So was a prospect I liked and think he can have a bright future here in New England. So it's good to see him playing well, at least. Now, you look towards the center and the left guard with Cole Strange, who's not playing great right now as well. David Andrews continues to really struggle in pass protection, and it's not just against dominant opponents. He had a really bad game against the Raiders, who do not have a good interior defensive line. So, yeah, he just has definitely taken a step back this year and needs to be dinged for it. Now, it's not quite as bad on the defense, though it's not all great on the defense. Some guys up front have started to step up, especially Christian Barmore. Was kind of nowhere to be found in the first quarter of the season, but he's come back on. I don't know if he was injured or what, but he's definitely made his presence felt as a rusher. He's got good pressure numbers, and I love Christian Barmore, but he does seem to kind of have these months where he just disappears. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there, but he's definitely playing well right now. He's got to come up. And then Anthony Jennings as well, another Alabama guy here. He has definitely had to step up with Matthew Judon getting hurt. And he hasn't been Matthew Judon as a rusher, but in terms of that early down presence, he is so physical up front against the run. He's always made sense as that on-ball linebacker for the Patriots in this system, and he continues to play really well against the run. He had back-to-back weeks in the Raiders game week 6 and the Bills game week 7 where he registered 5 defensive stops, and he had 4 the week before that against New Orleans. The defensive stop, by the way, is what PFF registers as what constitutes a failed play for the opposing offense. So I think against the run, it's like a stop within 3 yards or something. But that's really an impressive feat to get 14 of those in 3 weeks. That's pretty savage. So I like Anthony Jennings, and then Jelani Tavai as well continues to be that thumping linebacker. He's even got his hands on some balls for some pass breakups. He's been a really nice pickup for them. He's just kind of steadily climbed since he's been playing here. They don't ask a lot of their true middle linebackers, Jelani Tavai and Jawan Bentley. So there's less opportunities for these guys to have negatively graded plays, but for what they ask him to do, it's not necessarily easy. And that's, thump, take on guards, and be a presence in the middle of the field at about 250 pounds. And Jelani Tavai has been able to do that for them. And then into the secondary, a couple guys continuing to fall here. So especially J.C. Jackson, who we did lower after he was acquired for nothing from the L.A. Chargers. And this just continues to be weird. I mean, he's playing horrible also for the Patriots, just as he was for the Chargers. I mean, has he had really a good game even since the Chargers signed him? I know he had the injury not long after he was there, but it's just been brutal, man. The fall from grace for a guy that was kind of viewed as a top 5 to 10 cornerback when he left New England is now, fighting for a roster spot, honestly. Like, he didn't make the trip to New England because of some off-field concerns. His head clearly is not in the right place, to say the least. So it's just going to be a continued slide for J.C. Jackson until he shows us something. And then Adrian Phillips, Patriots fans could probably explain this one better than me. He's barely playing, and when he has played, he's missing tackles and giving up yardage and coverage. He's 31 years old. They've kind of supplemented his role in a lot of ways, and he's just maybe getting aged out here and regressing at 31 years old, which tends to happen. But definitely needed to come down. He's not the stud starting corner that stud kind of starting box safety that he's been for them, to say the least. But Jabril Peppers, on the other hand, I thought about him for star of the month, but Demario Douglas is like, I wanted to have some positivity for the offense, but Jabril Peppers, man, the Patriots bringing him back for 2 years, $9 million, is looking like one of the most team-friendly contracts in the league right now. And this front office has definitely had their faults, but that's a feather in their cap at least, because he's playing like a top 10 safety this season in every phase. He's playing a lot more free safety than he ever has. He kind of had that breakout year for Patrick Graham's defense in New York. Had a hard time getting back to that level for a couple of years, but he's been totally unlocked in this defense. And what's fun here is he's doing a little bit of everything. He's played a lot of free safety. He's played, I think, about 2/3, maybe 60% of his snaps as a free safety, at least as a two-shell defender. A lot of his plays are coming down and, cracking wide receivers trying to come over the middle. I mean, when he hits, man. He has had some huge plays just from, destroying ball carriers. He had the forced fumble on Jalen Hurts that set the Patriots up to potentially win that game in week 1, and it's been more plays like that ever since. He's been a presence around the line of scrimmage. He's tackling consistently. He's been awesome, and he's going to be 29 years old next year. This is a guy that was a first-round pick. The Browns never really knew how to use him. Was, I think, the number 1 overall recruit in his college class. He's a sensational athlete, and he's putting it on display here. I think he's a very fascinating guy to monitor into the future here if he can kind of sustain this level of play. And honestly, kind of who he's reminding me a lot of is Antoine Winfield Jr. with kind of the role he plays and some of the stylistic game-changing plays that he's made. So he's just been a ton of fun. I thought about making him the star of the month as well. So it's not all bad for New England, just mostly bad. And then we have the first team to fire their head coach this season, the Las Vegas Raiders. And for their star of the month, we are going to go with the nearly 31-year-old veteran cornerback, Marcus Peters, who was a late offseason addition for the Raiders. We weren't quite sure where his health was at after being relatively unavailable for the for the Ravens a lot of last season, but definitely healthy and looking like the old Marcus Peters, man. He's honestly playing, I would say, in consideration for Pro Bowl level, and having that big pick six in prime time against Jared Goff certainly going to help out there. But yeah, he's just, giving up 20, 30 yards a week for the most part. 2-3 catches. Like, he's gonna give up some yardage. He's never been a shutdown guy, but as we've seen, he makes plays. He's got 4 pass breakups on the season, really good ball skills. Want to see him clean up his tackling a little bit, which I suppose he has the last couple of weeks. Hasn't missed a tackle since week 7, but just having a really good year, a great signing for the Raiders. Needed to come back up to kind of where he was before his little short falling out there with his injury. But let's talk about this offense a little bit. Obviously, Jimmy Garoppolo's got to come down. He gets benched, had one of the worst primetime performances you'll ever see. Accuracy's never been a strong suit of Jimmy Garoppolo, but that was just unplayable. So he takes a seat. I do think, that was as bad as it would get for Jimmy Garoppolo. I still think he can be kind of a fringe starter type of guy. But clearly, it wasn't working here. So he's going to come down and probably going to head towards the kind of Andy Dalton trajectory for Jimmy Garoppolo. We'll see if he gets another starting opportunity or not. But definitely had to come down. And then Aiden O'Connell is going to get a +1. He, made a really nice throw to Trey Tucker and took care of business against Danny DeVito and the Giants. We'll continue to evaluate Aiden O'Connell the rest of the season and see if he's anything more than a career backup type, which I always felt he was. But I liked how he read defenses and played aggressive. Didn't put the ball in harm's way in that game against the Giants. So definitely not a bad performance for a guy that I was pretty hard on when I made my quarterback tiers video, for those that watched that last week. But I am going to lower Josh Jacobs. I know his last 2 weeks have been better, and that's good to see. But even then, just the last 2 weeks, not playing up to that 93 grade I had on Josh Jacobs after he was arguably the best running back in the National Football League last season. And honestly, after that Patriots game where he had 25 attempts without missing a single missed tackle, it was like he's got to come down, because that was not him last season. Last season, Josh Jacobs forced 90 missed tackles. That's crazy. This year, he's got just 19 on the season. Granted, 10 of those have come in the last 3 weeks. But yeah, he had to come down. He hasn't been that superstar Josh Jacobs, and he'll continue to fall if he can't kind of get back to that old level, because that was obviously a very high standard being rated up there to 93. He's not playing up to it. And then Michael Mayer is going to come up, had that big game against the Patriots. He's become a larger part of the offense really since then. Hooper's kind of made a re-emergence. Mayer didn't necessarily have his full-on breakout. They've still kind of gone back to him being tight end 2 a little bit, but definitely can play. We know he can play. If they're starting Aiden O'Connell, why are we bothering with Austin Hooper over Michael Mayer? Let's just let Michael Mayer cook. Because he's been a monster after the catch. He's been sure-handed. He's been Michael Mayer that we knew he was out of Notre Dame. He was one of the highest floor prospects in the entire draft. And then some more gains on this offensive line. Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach, one of the more underrated names in the league, in my opinion. He's done an amazing job with this offensive line, with a total motley crew of mid-round picks, street free agents, you name it. And both these guys, Dylan Parham, a little bit different than Greg Van Roten. Parham, a year 2, kind of undersized guard out of Memphis with great athleticism, great hand usage. He continues to trend in the right direction for sure, going up for the second episode in a row. But one thing I definitely did not see coming was Greg Van Roten having a career year at 31 years old. He's been a complete rock. He's had games where he's just out there mauling dudes against the run. So what a find, whether you want to credit the front office that just got fired or Carmen Brasillo, the offensive line coach, maybe a little bit of both. I don't know. Credit Greg Van Roten for breaking out this late in his career, but he'll be an interesting contract to monitor at 31 years old. How does the league view him after he's played so well for this Raiders team? Then you flip over. I have notes on Trey Tucker. Not going to come up because he's only got a couple catches on the season, but he has shown that vertical speed and ability to be a deep threat. If he keeps doing that, he's going to go up very quickly here. It's such a small sample size. It's tough to give him too much love here, but he's shown he can convert in a couple games now. But flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, it's mostly veterans, which is, I guess, good. We already had Marcus Peters. You probably wish they had a little bit more young talent that you were excited about. Not that there aren't some young guys here, but anyway, John Jenkins, Adam Butler, 2 total Josh McDaniels, Patriots, Belichick tree defensive tackles. Jenkins at 34 years old is playing really well against the run. Adam Butler at, I think, 29 years old, has been a really functional pass rusher for them. They've desperately needed anybody on the interior to step up. They've found it in some Band-Aids here that they deserve some credit, even if it really doesn't mean much for this Raiders team. And then Luke Masterson as well. He's interesting. He's a year two undrafted rookie, and he got a little bit of playing time in his rookie season and kind of popped a little bit. And he's gotten some opportunities with Divine Diablo being out, and he's stepped up. He's had a pass breakup. He's had some nice, run defense plays. So we'll keep an eye on him. If nothing else, maybe a nice backup to have here. And then Robert Spillane's been another really nice signing. They were just poaching AFC North veteran players, I suppose. But Robert Spillane might have a little bit more of an extended future here. Was always kind of a rotational linebacker in Pittsburgh as they flirted around with Devin Bush and Miles Jack, or at least over the last couple of years, he kind of forced his way into that linebacker rotation and was probably the best of the three when he did play. But they ultimately let him go, and he's just shown that he is a good three-down starter as a linebacker in the NFL. He's a balanced player. He's plus against the run. He's pretty solid in coverage. He's got decent size. Just a good all-around player. A nice signing for this group. And then Amari Burney was a late-round drafted linebacker out of Florida. It's nothing fancy here, but he's getting some playing time in Divine Diablo's absence. And outside of one brutal coverage play where he let a guy get away from him and run far, I think it was Amon-Ra St. Brown. It tends to be against Detroit, where he just let him cross his face and burn him for 40 yards. Other than that, Burney's been adequate across the board, so he's going to get a little bit of love. And then Nate Hobbs continues to climb here, and he's back into the slot now, which in his rookie season, he was one of the breakout kind of day three rookies of his draft class in 2020, or that would have been 2021, actually. But he was asked to go back outside and play outside corner last year, and he was pretty good, but not great. He's back into the slot, and honestly, the level that he's playing at is up there with some of the best slot corners in the NFL. It's just he's missed a lot of time this year, but when he's been out there, he's been a complete stud in both coverage and run defense from the slot, just as he was in his rookie year. So I'm a big Nate Hobbs fan. He's one of the best kind of assets that this team has on the defensive side of the ball, at least. And then Amik Robertson, he's interesting because he's just super boom or bust. He's had games where he's just been getting demolished in coverage. But, he had that big game winner against the Packers that we talked about in the last Studs and Duds. He got a boost for that. And then a dominant game against the New York Giants with a pick and another pass breakup. He's a ball hawk. He's a playmaker. He's undersized. He's not a sticky coverage player. But for a third corner, you can live with him out there and hope he has a good week, So he's been a fun guy. And then we have the Baltimore Ravens, who buckle up because they've been super hot and awesome lately, and they're going to have, I think, the most movement out of anybody this week, certainly the most in a positive direction. Let's start with the star of the month, Geno Stone. This one's easy. Dude's got an interception in each of the last 4 games. Yeah, that's your star of the month. Now, some of them have landed right in his lap, but he's also had other good coverage plays too. He's just been that classic day 3 Iowa defensive back, your Micah Hyde, your Desmond King, Amani Hooker for the Titans, yet another one. Geno Stone next in line. And when the Ravens took him in the 7th round in 2020, it was like, yeah, this dude's probably going to be pretty good, especially on the Ravens. He's getting an opportunity here, and guess what? He's pretty good. He has had some missed tackles lately. Actually, quite a lot of missed tackles. He's missed 6 in the last 4 games. So let's clean that up a little bit. And as we know, interceptions aren't going to sustain at this rate, so he's going to have to keep it up in coverage. This tends to happen every time a safety ends up like the league leader in interceptions out of nowhere. Is fans are like, yo, he's only a 77. He's the best safety in the NFL. It's like, well, interceptions are one play that are very fluky a lot of the times, and a lot of variables go into it. So I'm impressed by Geno Stone. I think it's awesome that this also happens for him in a contract year. So he'll become an interesting free agent, I think, because Marcus Williams is paid heavily to do this role for a while here in Baltimore. So Good vibes all around with Geno Stone. But let's talk about the offense a little bit. Lamar just continues to impress in this spread pro style offense. His decision making, the pocket presence, the accuracy, all of it. He really is playing at an MVP level. We've spent a lot of time already this year talking about what he's doing so well, why it's working, and how fun it's been to watch. And it's only continued here for the Ravens that are kind of looking like, a potential Super Bowl team here with Lamar playing like this. But their run game has come alive lately. They definitely were missing J.K. Dobbins initially when he got hurt. And Gus Edwards, honestly, for a couple weeks there, it was like, he's not getting the full workload. He's not looking super dynamic, but he's kind of looking more like Gus Bus more and more. An awesome Week 9 performance against the Seattle Seahawks. I think he won Kyle Brandt's Angry Runs shirt this week. But he wasn't even the best running back out there because Keaton Mitchell, how fun is this, man? I thought about making him the star of the month, even though he only got 16 snaps this month. That's how sick he was. So Keaton Mitchell was an undersized back out of Eastern Carolina whose college tape was so fun. He was my 11th ranked running back in this class. I had a early day 3 grade on him. Definitely thought he should have been drafted. He ends up going undrafted here to Baltimore. And even Ravens fans knew, like, they were waiting every week. They were checking the injury report as, like, once J.K. Dobbins left, it's like, okay, when do we get Keaton Mitchell back? Because we know he's going to be good because he's a freaking good running back. And he gets out there, Week 9, he gets an opportunity, and there you go. The dude's awesome. Not only the speed and, the scat back stuff, but he was showing vision and, like, toughness between the tackles. He's actually now listed up to 5'8", 191, so he's got some girth to him. He forced 8 missed tackles on 9 carries. So obviously passed the eye test. He can only go up so much for getting 9 carries, but 138 yards and a touchdown looked insane. So this is kind of the year of the undersized speed back, and Keaton Mitchell looks incredible. Now, I am going to lower Odell Beckham just by 1. We didn't really know what he was going to look like coming off the year off. The last time we saw him play, he was damn good for the LA Rams. I don't think he's quite as good as he was for the Rams. He's still been a solid piece for them, but I think just was rated a little bit too high now that we've got a little bit more information on what he's going to look like. He's been a fine possession receiver, really nothing more, nothing less. And then Mark Andrews is going to get one of the 2 ratings points that we dropped from him last week. Honestly, you can make an argument he should get them both back, but it was a sloppy start for him that we can't just forget about. But yeah, he's kind of back to looking like the old Mark Andrews, been a focal point of the passing game, coming down with tough catches, been a beast. So he's back into the 90s. And then on the offensive line as well, John Simpson, who has started games for the Raiders in years past, ends up here in Baltimore, starting here at left guard. And the last 3 weeks, he's really settled in as a pass protector after some road bumps before that. So he's going to go up. And then Tyler Linderbaum was also a candidate for Star of the Month, to be honest. Since he's come back clean and healthy from that injury, he's been up there in terms of who the best centers in the NFL are this season. He really has. He's now listed over 300 pounds, which I love to see. He was under 300 when he was drafted out of Iowa, and I think that has only naturally improved his consistency in pass protection. He's been a lockdown center in pass pro. He always had the technique and basically everything you wanted to see from pass pro, but at close to 290 pounds, it was like, is he going to be able to anchor well? Well, I like it much better around 300, which is pretty average for a center. So, and that hasn't hurt his run blocking either. So Tyler Linderbaum was a great pick when they made it and continues to be kind of a steal, honestly, for a late first round pick. But then let's go back to the defense that has been so damn fun, and just so many guys in the front 4 that have been making an impact here. And a large part of this is the system. The Ravens have been designing stunts and blitzes better than I think anybody in the league right now, maybe outside of Dallas, the Jets. Those are kind of what you think of with the best stunt design teams. But Mike McDaniel has, I mean, look at that Lions game. They knew going into that matchup that they didn't really have the manpower necessarily to beat the best or second best offensive line in the NFL head up. But they out-schemed them and confused them and got through and dominated Jared Goff and that passing game. And all these guys are a part of it. They're all, winning one-on-ones and playing well. They deserve to go up as well, but it's been the perfect pairing between talent and scheme that has led to the Ravens being one of the best pass rushers in the NFL this year. But let's talk about these guys on an individual basis, even though it's kind of a hive mind between this group. But Travis Jones, he's been, I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm slandering the other guys, but he's probably the guy that's doing the most work on his own right now. Like, his production is the least scheme dependent, I suppose, is the way I'm trying to say that. I don't know. What I'm trying to say is the dude is mashing dudes in the trenches. Year two, another just complete steal in last year's draft class. I would have been totally fine if Travis Jones went late first, early second. Like, I thought he had a super high floor as a run defender. Hasn't shown much as a pass rusher yet because they haven't needed anything from him, but I think he does have some athletic traits to maybe do that someday, to kind of do what Michael Pierce is doing as that big pass rusher on the inside that opens up a lot of space for these stunts. But at least, he is showing he can play, man. He's a good player. Then you got Justin Madubuike. Now, I know Ravens fans have been looking for Madubuike to go up here, and he definitely deserves to go up. He's had individual pass rush wins that have been really impressive. He's really lightning quick. He can, use those swim moves and chop moves to just use his quickness to get by guys. He's got decent enough power. Like, he is winning one-on-one. But a lot of his production is also coming off of these stunts, because when you have an interior guy that can loop and bend like Justin Madubuike can, that's a weapon from a schematic point of view, and they are pointing him in the right direction. So he is going to go up. I like Justin Madubuike, but I think Ravens fans think he's like one of the best D tackles in the NFL this year, and I wouldn't quite go that far, but he's been very good, benefiting from that total of 8 sacks that he has on the season. And then Tavius Robinson, a rookie 4th rounder, Canadian football background, older prospect. He's been thumping on early downs, getting some reps against the run. He's looked the part. And then Odafe Owe, he looks healthy. He looks really good. He's been getting after the quarterback off the edge really well these last couple of weeks, getting back to defending the run well too, like he did in his rookie season. It's been a while since we've really thought about Odafe Owe being a good player. He's definitely gone down in previous episodes of Studs and Duds, going back to last year, but definitely trending back towards being a good first-round pick for Owe. Then Kyle Van Noy, too. What a find he was off the street. I mean, he's been a super productive pass rusher. He's been a huge impact now in both the Titans game and most recently in the Seahawks game. Had a really nice pass rush, kind of got around Charles Cross, the second-year first-round pick for the Seahawks, and strip sack of Geno Smith. He's just been another part of this outstanding pass rush, and another example of, like, that rep right there was him just winning. It's the perfect marriage between scheme and talent, as I said. And then Jadeveon Clowney, too, just playing with his hair on fire. I mean, he looks like he's enjoying football more than ever, even though it's the least aesthetically pleasing in the world to see him wearing number 24. I hate everything about that, but I love everything about his play, man. I've been hard on Clowney throughout the years, but he's been playing with tenacity against the run again, when that had kind of fallen out a little bit last year, and then obviously just using those physical tools, just kind of still not necessarily showing like a big pass rush skill set or anything, but using his hands well, using his speed, get off, bend well. And he's been, in the year of the pass rusher, he's been up there in terms of total pressures and production and stuff. He's been an awesome signing. He's been way better than I could have imagined when they signed him. And then Brandon Stevens as well continues to play well behind this great pass rush. He's having a bit of a breakout year himself here in year 3. It's a little bit tough to keep track of all of these corners with all the injuries and rotating pieces they've had, but Stevens has been a bit of a mainstay back there. He's a big, freaky athlete, year 3 out of SMU. If he's figuring things out, there could be a real CB2 in the making there for the Ravens. And then even the punter, Jordan Stout. We know the Ravens are good at their special teams, and Jordan Stout in year 2, I believe, here is starting to, pin things back in the 20s a little bit better, getting a little bit more hang time on his punts, and doing pretty well. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers, whose star of the month is, I almost said first-round pick, Joey Porter Jr. Damn well should have been a first-round pick. Not sure why the NFL let the Steelers get Joey Porter Jr. in the second round, but he is every single bit as good as advertised. Not only is he just straight up better than Patrick Peterson, who, if you're looking ahead here, is going to go down again. He is washed at 34 years old. There's really not much else to say other than that. We might as well just say that now while we're here. Patrick Peterson cannot run man coverage anymore. He was in a zone-heavy system in Minnesota, got some picks, and then Pittsburgh's like, hey, can you run stride for stride with guys at your age? The answer is no, he cannot. So he's washed. Levi Wallace not having a great year. So not only is Joey Porter better than those guys, he's just their best corner overall. I don't understand why it took them so long till week 7 until he was a full-time starter. And it took a week 5 performance against Baltimore where he had a beautiful interception down in the red zone on Lamar Jackson before they finally said, okay, yeah, we'll put in Joey Porter. He's going to be here for a long, long time. And I'm not going to say he's Sauce Gardner, but his overall play style and size and athletic traits are very similar. He's already out the gate an excellent press corner. Now, he has been penalized 4 times last week against the Tennessee Titans. That was on his college profile. He was as grabby as they come. You're probably always going to have to live with some of that with Joey Porter, which means fans of other teams, not named the Pittsburgh Steelers, are not going to like Joey Porter because he is grabby. Some might call it cheating. I don't know, but he's physical is the way I'm going to say it, and he's awesome. So +2 for Joey Porter. And then let's talk about the offense a little bit if we have to. There's a couple guys going up that have been nice role players. Jaylen Warren as the kind of quasi-starter with Najee Harris at this point. He's been more explosive. Najee does a lot of the dirty work, has a little bit more size, but Jaylen Warren is juiced up. He hits the hole really hard. He breaks tackles. He's been awesome in the receiving game. He's the perfect number 2 back. He really is. And then Connor Hayward has actually stepped into their backup tight end position with Pat Freiermuth has been on injured reserve. And, he's been fine. He's been mostly catching the ball when they check it down to him. And he's just, he's a player. I like Connor Hayward. Nothing special. He's a 6 foot, 230-pound tight end. There's only so much you can do with him, but he's played his role well. And then the offensive line has had issues. They're kind of sorting through how they want to play this tackle situation. It is worth noting Broderick Jones has played better in his recent starts as opposed to that horrific outing in his first start against the Houston Texans. So it is worth noting that, but Dan Moore has not been the answer at left tackle. He really hasn't been the answer for a long time. That's why they drafted Broderick Jones. But Dan Moore is having his worst year in a while. And I think we're probably at the point where it's going to be Broderick Jones moving forward for the best. But beyond that, I do want to note Deontay Johnson balling out, playing up to my rating of him. I love Deontay Johnson. I've always defended him. He's had a rough stretch, but he's been really good since coming back from the injury. Got his first touchdown. He has been a spark plug for this offense. They've needed that route runner type because as good as Pickens has been, that's not really him, that quick separator. So it's a nice 1-2 punch there. Good to see him playing well. And if he continues to play as well as he's been playing, he'll even go up. But let's talk about this defense. It's been pretty status quo for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, but some rotational players up front have done a good job. DeMarvin Leal, the mid-round pick out of Texas A&M, once upon a time was in top 10s of your mock drafts, but just not a great athlete. But as a hybrid 3-tech defensive end for them, he's getting in there, doing some nice stuff against the run, kind of slowly growing as a young player. And then Armon Watts, this team picked up. He's shown flashes in years past, especially with the Minnesota Vikings, and he's been doing a little bit of a two-way defensive tackle play for them. They've really needed some guys to play well with Cam Hayward out of the lineup this whole season, really. And Watts he's got some pressures, he's got some defensive stops. He's looking pretty good for a low-level veteran. And then Montravius Adams has actually been a full-time starter for them for the most part. I tweeted out the double teams graph for interior defensive linemen, it's actually crazy. Montravius Adams has faced the second highest rate of true double teams on pass rush snaps in the NFL, which is not who you would think of. So not a big surprise. He doesn't have a lot of pass rush production there, but he's holding his own against the run, and like I said, being a nice role player up front. I do want to talk a little bit about Cam Hayward. So Hayward has missed all of this season before week 9, right? He played 14 snaps week 1, got hurt, and just came back last week. He's 34 and a half years old. And while he's defied his age for a long time, you can only do that for so long, especially if he's coming back from an injury. He was virtually ineffective against the Titans in his return. Now, I have too much respect for Cam Hayward to say, one game, I'm going to drop you, but it's something we got to keep an eye on. Father time comes for all of these players, and that'd be a big loss for the Steelers, even if some of these other guys are stepping up for them. But these edge players just continue to play great. I mean, obviously, TJ Watt, who got a big bump in the last episode, he's continuing to look great. Alex Highsmith, though, man, he's honestly doing his best effort to match TJ Watt punch for punch. He's actually got just one less pressure than TJ Watt on 20 less pass rush snaps. Now, TJ Watt, a little bit better at finishing. He's got 10 sacks as opposed to Highsmith's 5, but Highsmith has had some super impactful sacks on the season as well. He's the one that actually had that strip sack fumble against the Ravens that really sealed the deal. I've been kind of on this going back to the Steelers deep dive, where this is going to be a player that he's going to get a massive contract, and it's going to be a bargain for the Steelers, and people are going to scream overpay. And he just continues to get better. He's a freak athlete, came out of Charlotte. Now in year 4, he's kind of a low-end 1 right now, and he gets to be their number 2 next to one of the best pass rushers in all of football. So this edge duo is truly remarkable. Highsmith as well was a good candidate for Star of the Month. Nick Herbig as well has gotten into the lineup a little bit. He's been really splashing into the backfield against the run. Now, I really like Nick Herbig. I have high expectations, so it's good to see him playing well in limited snap counts. At this point, he's probably not going to see the field a ton moving forward, because actually Marcus Golden is playing well too on the edge, all 4 of these guys. So it's, there's only so many snaps to go towards Herbig, but yeah, good to see him playing well. And then, we talked about Patrick Peterson. So there's your Pittsburgh Steelers. Then we have the Houston Texans. No surprise here. CJ Stroud, Star of the Month. I mean, really, especially just from that Bucs game, which is going to be one of the better quarterback performances on the season. Rookie or not, he looks like a seasoned vet. He's so calm and in control in terms of the structure and the accuracy, just as he was at Ohio State, but continuing to make plays out of structure too. There haven't been a bunch of boneheaded mistakes that you see from a lot of rookie quarterbacks. He's just impressed in every regard, checked every single box, and is well on his way to win Rookie of the Year. Thanks, Arthur Smith. No, CJ Stroud well deserves it, though I thought Bijan was going to run away with this thing. Anyway, that's an NFC topic and has nothing to do with the Texans. CJ Stroud has just been remarkable, man. Love to see it. But let's talk about the rest of the offense as well. There's a lot of guys stepping up here too, not just CJ Stroud. One guy that's not is Devin Singletary. They've had to lean into him maybe even a little bit more than they would have hoped, especially over this stretch of time. I think Dameon Pierce has just been a little bit banged up. Obviously missed that Week 9 game against the Bucs. But I don't get it, man. I don't get where the Devin Singletary from last year went. I mean, a big part of it is a scheme change. This is a wide zone run scheme as opposed to Buffalo, where it's more of a shotgun inside zone type of scheme. Definitely, would make sense that running style fits him better because Singletary's not a speedster, but he's got some of that patience and ability to change lanes for an inside run game. But just the lack of missed tackles forced that he had last year, the lack of dynamism. I mean, Singletary really was one of the more underrated players in the whole NFL last year. His jump cut that was on display last year, man, it was real, and it's not been there this year. So he's got to come down. He's just not showing that player this year. But beyond that, a lot of these guys playing well. Nico Collins continues to be kind of their focal point X wide receiver. He's got to get healthy, but his play is self-explanatory. He's been awesome this season. He looks like a T. Higgins type, honestly. Mike Williams type with some of his in-breaking dominance too on some of these deep digs that they run so many of. It's so hard to cover a guy that quick and that big and that good after the catch over the middle. So he's been awesome. And then Tank Dell. Dude, you can't cover this guy. He was just like this at the Senior Bowl, was just like this on film, but at 165 pounds, everybody in the NFL, and credit to those that did have Tank Dell as like a top 50 player. I liked Tank Dell, but I had my hesitations. I thought he went around where he should have gone. Based on my evaluation, obviously I was wrong. Tank Dell's freaking awesome, man. He is that separation that he had at Houston. It has been copy and paste at the next level. I mean, he's already one of the best route runners in the damn NFL. Like his technique, his foot speed, and his overall athleticism, his fluid hips. Like, just watch Tank Dell's tape, man. He is as fun of a route runner as you'll see. And he's been making tough catches all year, too. And not a ton of drop issues, which did follow him at Houston. He's just been sensational, man. There's no way around it. And it's a nice pairing, too, because for any rookie quarterback to have a wide receiver that can separate like Tank Dell can to all three levels, that's going to help C.J. Stroud, process things and see the field well and get the ball out. But I also talked about this with Tank Dell because he's so small. He's got a tiny catch radius, and C.J. Stroud, the biggest resounding positive trait about C.J. Stroud was the accuracy. So you're putting, an accurate quarterback that can put it on the money with Tank Dell. This pairing is not going anywhere. They really were made for each other. It's going to be a ton of fun to see these guys grow together. And he's just such a perfect complement for Nico Collins too, man, because he's, Collins is the big body guy. Dell's the separator. This is going to be so fun for so long. And hell, even Noah Brown the last 2 weeks has been on a freaking run, man. He made some plays in that Bucs game. Looked like Des Bryant out there. He's done this at times for the Cowboys where he gets hot and just has incredible ball skills. I don't know if he's going to sustain, but he definitely needs to go up if he's, looking himself like a Nico Collins, Mike Williams type. If nothing else, as a backup to Nico Collins, that's awesome. Or just another big-bodied option out there for C.J. Stroud. So these guys are playing really well, man. The Texans are third in the NFL in receiving grade, which I think I had them ranked like 30th coming into the year in terms of weaponry. They have just completely flipped the course there. And Stroud's a part of that, right? You play well at quarterback, you're going to elevate some of these wide receivers. And then the offensive line, not a ton of movement here, but George Fant has been a godsend of a pickup for the Houston Texans. Granted, Titus Howard is healthy now, so they could put Titus Howard, who they gave a contract extension, out there at right tackle. But with the way George Fant's playing at right tackle as a very secure pass protector, they don't want to mix things up. They'll just play Howard at left guard for now. I think Howard's still the long-term right tackle, but Fant has started a lot of games in this league, and he's a very solid, serviceable option there. He's been a part of their success really since week one. Honestly, I think he was starting week one with all those injuries, and he hasn't lost a spot since. But then on the defense, it's been some pros and cons. Jerry Hughes is 35 years old. He's at about a third of his efficiency from last year. He continued to defy his age last year, but not so much this year. He's still had some splash plays. He's still been okay against the run. He's still a functional, solid player, but last year he was still kind of a good number 2 caliber pass rusher. He hasn't so much been that this year. He's been kind of an afterthought in terms of his pass rushing. And a big part of that as well is Jonathan Grenard has reemerged. Grenard was a stunning breakout player in year 2 for him, where he went on a tear and then kind of disappeared again last year. Well, that makes this his contract year, and he's right back to that clip he was on in 2021, where he looked like a potential solid starter of a pass rusher. And the last 5 weeks, he's been putting it all on display. Power, finesse moves, run defense, you name it. He is really trying to finish strong and earn a contract to be kind of Will Anderson's running mate here. And Will Anderson also continues to just play really solid. He's been defending the run well off the edge, just as he did at Alabama. Was always so impressive with his instincts and kind of maneuverability, because he's an undersized edge, right? He plays at like 245 pounds, but he's really good at navigating blocks and slipping into the backfield. He's instinctive to knife into holes. So he's really been good there, just as he was at Alabama, but he's been a solid pass rusher as well. Had a great game against the Saints. So he's looked the part of that sort of blue chip defensive prospect. But let's get into the second level of this defense. Henry To'oTo'o. So I compared him to Blake Martinez. I felt pretty good about that comp. The amount of PTSD I have watching Henry To'oTo'o try to play linebacker in the NFL as a Packers fan that could not stand watching Blake Martinez early in his career, it's insane. They are literally the same player, where every time there's a big play, he's the one chasing in pursuit, just always out of position. And then even with To'oTo'o here in his rookie year, that's another reason I didn't like him as a prospect, was he was known as this run defender, but he didn't have great size. He was not a great athlete, and he missed a shit ton of tackles. And that's followed him to the NFL even worse than it was at Alabama. So he's been benched. Was so horrible. I mean, 65 is honestly generous. I don't even know why I had him that high to begin with. But, I mean, that's before we even get into the coverage and like just how bad teams have been picking on him. So getting Denzel Perryman back healthy has been very nice for the Texans. Benched might have been a harsh word against To'oTo'o when Perriman's been hurt, but either way, they're happy he's not out there anymore. Yuck. Some of the worst linebacker tape you'll see this year and for a long time. But Blake Cashman, on the other hand, man, this has been, honestly, one of my favorite narratives from the NFL season. I'm obviously biased because I had a first-round grade on Blake Cashman, man. I said he was better than Devin Bush. I had him ranked above him in that draft class. I was pounding the table for teams to take him first, second round, third, fourth round, roll around. I'm like, why are teams not drafting Blake Cashman? Turns out, massive injury concerns. And I had a close grade on Cashman than I did on even Devin White. And that's even aging well, because Cashman has been playing better than either of those linebackers ever have. Cashman has been quite possibly a top 5 linebacker in the NFL, like full stop. He's been all over the field against the run. He's not missing tackles. He's been great in coverage. He's been that guy I loved at Minnesota, where you could tell like he had a great feel in coverage, super instinctive against the run. He has the full package. It's just, can he stay healthy? He's stayed healthy this year. DeMeco Ryans seems to have found his guy here. I just hope he can stay healthy and be this kind of late career superstar, honestly, because he plays linebacker at that level. And then Tavierre Thomas, he's kind of a studs and duds extraordinaire. I think only Texans fans really know who Tavierre Thomas is, but as we went through the rough years of the Houston Texans, with Coley and obviously Lovie Smith, Tavierre Thomas has been a guy that's like slowly climbed up from like a 62 overall or something like that. Just a guy that has carved out a role, kind of met this Texans opportunity well, and has sustained his starting job in the slot. He's super physical. He's got speed. He's got that sort of, chip on his shoulder mentality where he knows, because of his draft pedigree and his age, he's in his late 20s. He knows like any snap could be my last, so I might as well play it 100% every single snap, and it shows. So he's continued to just be a solid coverage player, really good run defender, and deserves to keep going up. Then we finish up, as always, in this AFC edition of Studs and Duds with the Tennessee Titans. But it's not all bad, Titans fans. How about Will Levis looking the part, looking like a guy that, at the very least, should have probably been a first-round pick? Steps in, gets that first start against the Atlanta Falcons. I did the whole film breakdown on it and why it was so impressive. I would just defer you guys to that film breakdown if you want more in-depth analysis of it. But man, the arm talent, his ability to read defenses ain't bad. Just kind of like I said, coming out, I think the amount that he was under pressure at Kentucky has made him more comfortable in the NFL, especially considering he's had to play behind a bad offensive line here in Tennessee too. So yeah, Will Levis, easy decision for Star of the Month, because now it's like Titans have something to cheer for this year, and that's for Will Levis to continue to play well and be their quarterback of the future, and honestly potentially build up some hype for next season, right? Because this was supposed to be a wasted year anyway, but we know like what Mike Vrabel teams can do. But there's some other guys on the offense playing well. So Tyler Spears, their rookie running back as well. I mean, this looks like a great draft class. Peter Skoronski's been okay at guard, but he's been a necessary piece for them. He at least hasn't been a turnstile. And then Tyjae Spears, man, I know he's got that potential knee long-term issue or whatever. I don't want to jinx anything, but he's looking like my pro comp of Aaron Jones. Like, he has juice, and he plays in a way that Derrick Henry, like he brings something to the table that Derrick Henry doesn't necessarily do. It's a perfect complement to each other. He's been awesome in the receiving game. He was a guy pretty much everybody that watched him at Tulane loved, and you know he's translated it to the NFL. Also, DeAndre Hopkins. We weren't necessarily sure what he was going to look like in a new system with a new quarterback, and after the last couple of years have been a little bit chunky for him. I don't know why chunky was the word that came to my mind, but it does just kind of sound right. But he's not all the way back to old DeAndre Hopkins, but he certainly isn't the washed version of Hopkins that some people thought they were signing. Like, some people compared this to the Julio Jones signing and the Andre Johnson signing. It's like, no, Hopkins, when he's played the last 2 years, has been damn good, even if he isn't the best wide receiver in the NFL like he once was 3 years ago. But obviously, for Will Levis to have a target like that, and the game he had against the Falcons, he was a big part of Levis's big rookie debut. So yeah, Hopkins definitely looking like a great signing for the Titans, and it's working out for Hopkins. He's still producing and living it, like I said when they signed him, living in Nashville, not the worst thing in the world. And then I am going to lower Andre Dillard again. He's been a little bit better, but still just. He was kind of an exciting signing because he's a former first-round pick. It was like kind of that fog of war element of like, what is Andre Dillard after all these years of sitting behind Jordan Mailata? And, I think he's just kind of a very, very, like a bridge starter, basically. He's had his rough moments, and I think he needs to come down, but he's also like held up okay. He did get benched and then was put back in there. He's a lot better than Nicholas Petit-Frere, I'll put it that way, but I did want to lower him. I was probably just too high on what he was going to be for this Titans team coming into the year. They're going to have to look for another long-term answer at left tackle, and I continue to hold the opinion of why not try Peter Skoronski out there, because that's what he played in college. And it's not like he's been an ass kicker at guard. I don't know. Just my opinion. Some notes on the offense as well. We're kind of jumping all over the place here. Let's actually do Aaron Brewer, and then we'll go to my notes. Aaron Brewer has been a fun center. He's 6'1", 280 pounds, soaking wet. It's hilarious to see them line up, and he looks like a running back in the middle of the offensive line sometimes. But he's super athletic. He's just, he has that chip on his shoulder mentality that a lot of undersized players do, and in a wide zone blocking scheme, he's having some success, kind of getting on the move, getting that easy leverage that his lack of size actually helps him get. And he's got pretty good core strength relative to who he is. Now, the pass protection side of things, you have to give him help, especially like this upcoming week. They're playing Vita Vea. Like, you can't leave him alone with a true nose tackle like that, but you can kind of scheme around that. You can live with a center like this when you're hurting for a quality offensive lineman, and at least he's been a good run blocker. Now, like I mentioned, those notes, my dude Kyle Phillips getting out there, making a bunch of plays, felt like in that Steelers game. Kyle Phillips just feels like one of these guys, almost like a Blake Cashman that we just talked about with the Texans, where it's like, we know he can play, it's just, can he stay healthy? But they have another option in the slot there with him getting healthy these last few weeks. And it's good to see him playing well. He'll obviously go up if he gets more opportunities. But then Dylan Radins as well is interesting. He's been a bust for the Titans. They spent a solid second-round pick on him. And for years, it's like, whether they try to play him at tackle or guard, he just can't hold up. But he had to play right tackle against TJ Watt and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he was fine. And he was pretty good in run blocking, too. So, I don't know. I just feel like coming off the long week here, because they played on Thursday Night Football, I'm very curious to see what they do with their offensive line, because they've been shuffling it all up. But I think Radens deserves a chance to see kind of what year 3 at tackle could look like for him, because they've been trying to play him at guard, and that's not what he was coming out. So we'll keep an eye on that. But just a couple guys moving on the defense. I feel like the Titans' defense has mostly been what we know them to be. Christian Fulton's going to get his +1 back. We lowered him last week. He had a rough start. But the last couple weeks, he's looked much more like the Christian Fulton that we know and love, who's just a very solid kind of number 2 caliber corner. So good for him. And then the linebacker, Jack Gibbons, who beat out my dude, Monty Rice, in the preseason. I can't complain too much, though, because Jack Gibbons is a Golden Gopher. Good to see him out there thumping. You know, he is a Mike Vrabel style of linebacker. 240 pounds, is not afraid of contact. And he's been a good tackler. He's been just a very good physical presence down there in the trenches. And he plays off of Aziz Al-Shaair, who's a little more undersized, pretty well. So, you know, I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar. I think maybe someday we're looking at him like a Alex Singleton type maybe, but obviously he's been a nice find for them, an undrafted rookie last year out of Minnesota. And voila, we are complete. Thank you, everybody, for watching, whether you watched all 2.5 hours of this thing or just your team. I really can't thank you enough for your support of this series and this channel. We'll see when I'll be back. I'm already exhausted from doing these, so the thought of doing it again in 2 weeks sounds like a lot. But I'll keep you guys posted on Twitter and probably through a community post here on YouTube. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know in the comments down below if you think I missed out on anybody. And we'll see you in a few days for power rankings here on the channel. Peace out.